Good evening and welcome to the town work session of the town of Ossining for February 16th, 2016. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I hope everyone had a very happy Valentine's Day and celebrated President's Day by considering the impact that our presidents have had and the policies that impact our lives every day for so many years and for so many years to come. It will be interesting to see how the process unfolds over the coming months now that we have an empty seat on the Supreme Court, and I encourage everyone to stay involved and attuned. The school district hosted a wonderful Valentine's Day breakfast last week for our seniors, which really showed wonderful and talented students and staff the schools and our community have. So kudos to them and to all of the staff, our Parks and Recreation Department staff in the village that helped out with that. We are so proud. At our last meeting, there were some questions about the date set for the Independence Day fireworks this July. There was a date selected last October that had a number of considerations that led to that date being selected, which was June 30th. And in line with past practices of avoiding weekend dates, it was scheduled for the Thursday before the holiday weekend. We've looked into it and found that that is still going to be our best option for this year, even though it is a June date. So we're going to stick with it for this year, and we will revisit it for next year in the fall. Chris Soy, our Recreation Department Director, spoke with me about our summer concert series, and we are hoping to put together a new format for determining which acts will be featured, as well as opening up a possibility for smaller acts to lead off so we can have more talent before us this summer. So I hope that you'll all stay tuned for that. Quite a few of our departments attended the Association of Towns convention yesterday and today in New York City. Making it very accessible for many of us to receive training in various areas of town government so we can be sure that we offer the best to our residents. The workshops we attended will help us improve our policy setting, communications with the public. It showcased many opportunities for grant funding so that we can find ways to achieve all that we feel we need to here in the town. And it reminded us of areas we might want to re-examine to make sure we are in compliance with all aspects of the law. We will share more about this in the upcoming weeks. Tonight's work session is an opportunity for us, the town board, to hear from our engineering team about our lighting program, as well as an update on the state of our water and infrastructure, to hear from our planning consultant to the town, who's worked with the board last year to update the vision section of the comprehensive plan so that we can think about ways of unpacking the plan and what our next steps should be. And then to hear from a developer who has a project before the planning board for the Stony Lodge property. I want to thank you in advance, many in attendance here tonight and also at home, for listening to these and for every discussion of the town board with an open mind. And we look forward to hearing your feedback at our regular meetings by phone or by email in the future. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Paul Frioli and Andy Teese, who are going to talk to us about the infrastructure and water update and the LED lighting program and where we stand. So if you want to come on up and maybe sit over here. Well, that microphone isn't working. So if you want to just join us here, that would be great. Just make sure that the microphone is.
Thank you, Supervisor and Town Board, for having us. We'll follow your agenda here, and I guess keep it in that order. So I'll speak second, but Andrew will start off with discussion about the potable water system in the town, which I think as most people know, but I'll go into a little detail for those that don't in the audience or are new to the board. The town's potable water system is owned by the town and is included in your assets when you do your books, but it is operated and maintained by the village's water distribution system. which is overseen by Andrew Teese, who is the superintendent of water for the village. So,
Can I just stop you for one quick question?
sure.
I'm sorry. You said the water system is owned by the town? The water system or the property?
The infrastructure itself,
The
the
infrastructure.
pipes in
itself,
the
okay.
ground.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So that said, Andy wants to give a little update, as we do with the village routinely with some of our capital work, to the town, because you're really a partner in that effort. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Andy and then open up for some questions before we get into the LED project.
Can we clarify just so, am I on?
I don't think so.
I just want to clarify for anybody who's going to be watching this and who maybe didn't know before. So the water that the town gets comes from the village.
Correct.
So that they, just anybody who doesn't know, just to
Right.
clarify that.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of overview. Basically, the way the whole entire water system works is we have a water filtration plant. It's called the Indian Brook Water Filtration Plant. It was built back in 1986. It was designed for 4 million gallons a day. As of last summer, there was a few days, peak days, that we actually pumped out 4.5 million gallons. So over the capacity of what it was designed for. We've seen a steady increase of what's been pumped out over the last few years. I started here in 2005, and when I started here, the daily demand was much less. Previous to my start, the village, which operates the treatment plant and provides water to the village residents and then also to the town, purchased water of Newcastle to supplement their water source. So initially what we did was we got the plant under review and looked to see what asset management we could do in-house and how we could optimize the filtration plant. When I started, the filtration plant was producing about 3.2 million gallons a day, and at that time we were purchasing about 500,000 gallons a day off of the town of Newcastle. In certain situations, peak summer days, peak summer weeks, based on weather, based on if it was close to a drought situation, even if it was called a drought or not, we would purchase water off of Newcastle. So we optimized the treatment plant, and we were able to produce more water. And over the last 11 years, we were able to increase the capacity of the plant by changing out some of the processes, optimizing the chemicals, optimize the sludge production, control the plant more steady state. And last year we were able to put out on some peak days up to 4.5 million gallons a day. As I'd mentioned, it was designed by engineers Stearns and Wheelers back in 1983. It was built in '86, and it was approved from the health department for a throughput of 6 MGD, but designed at 4 MGD, which it can handle water hydraulically 6 MGD, but it can't treat water based under 10 state standards steady, depending on the turbidity. Turbidity is the clarity of the water. So getting back to it, through the years I've seen that it's harder for the plant to keep up with demand. So we started saying, let's look at this in two ways. Let's look at how we can optimize the leakage in the system, which we signed an agreement with New York City DEP, and they just completed their water demand management plan. So we are one of the 10th largest users north of New York City, so we have the ability to be part of that plan where they'll fund some small infrastructure changes to try and reduce our consumption or reduce our usage out in the system. We also enacted a plan where we are aggressively doing leak detection 5 days a week. So we put out data loggers throughout the town and throughout the village, and we listen for leaks between 2 and 4 in the morning. And the next day when the operations team goes out there to check, they can tell if there's a leak within that 500-foot section. So we're really trying to reduce leakage. In this management plan, it shows that there is lost water in the system based on either slow meters, based on leakage in the system, unaccounted for water, they call it. It's at 19%. There's systems out there that have 50%. There's systems that have 10%. So our goal is to get it down to 10%. And 10% is a lot over that type of that consumption in a year. So we're working on that side, but also in the meantime, we know that in 25 to 30 years, that plant's not going to be large enough to produce what we need to produce. So we hired Hazen and Sawyer about a year and a half ago, and they completed a water demand projection report, which I put before you tonight for the first time. And basically, there's two ways to look at how our system should be looked at in the next 25 years. You could look at it based on the trend projections, so like how the usage has gone up in the last 10 years, or you could look at development, and the development number is much less than what the trend would be. So as the village just hired Hazen and Sawyer to design a new filtration plant and construction management of that treatment plant, and in the next few years of the design, we're going to hone in even closer. So I didn't want to waste time on the conservation measures. I wanted to try and grab every drop of water that we're leaking in the system before we design a new filtration plant. I don't want to over-design the plant, but I want to make sure there is capacity to handle situations where if you have a 1 million gallon per day leak for 2 weeks, you could still fill your tanks. So we're looking at it both ways. But if you look at page 13 of this report, it shows what we're looking at in 25 years. And the way plants are designed, they're based on average daily demand, peak monthly demands, and peak day demands. And if you look at the steady growth development base number, right now you're looking at probably about a 7.5 to 8 million gallon per day facility, 25 to 30 years down the road. The difference between our filtration plants and some filtration plants that were built since our filtration plant was put online is there wasn't the foresight to add on to that filtration plant. A lot of the filtration plants in the 90s were built so that you could just add on a process and just expand pipes and make it easy. Our filtration plant doesn't have the footprint to do this. But in the big picture, when the new filtration plant is designed and built, we're going to reuse whatever tankage we could use at that filtration plant, at the existing plant, the sludge production systems, whatever we can possibly use, we're going to use. It's a little bit different because most of the filtration plants that went online had filtration avoidance in the early 90s. So basically, they were allowed to just chlorinate their system, and then once they met their projection to build a filtration plant to put it online, we need to keep the old plant online until the new plant is finished. So it's going to be a little tricky, but I'm sure we can do it. So that's what we're looking at there. And also the village, so for example, last year we had a couple days of 4.5 million gallons a day. We produce that water. I know that there's some development between the village and the town, and we want to be responsible on how we look at this. But we're also looking at talking to the town of Newcastle and other towns next to us to see what our options are to increase capacity during the summertime usage. So we need to plan for the next 7 years. Hazen has given us the estimate that it's about 6 to 7 years before you actually put water out the door. So we don't want to slow anything down, but we do want to be prepared for the future. So that's why we're doing our due diligence with outside sources or other water purveyors. That's pretty much it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
All right. How will all the construction, all the current approved projects like Harbor Square and the other ones, Avalon, how is that affecting our usage? And does that have any impact on the numbers?
Well, it's in this report. Let me look to see what page it is. There were numbers that were provided for the village and for the town. Okay. I have it in another spreadsheet. But for example, Harbor Square, I know the number off the top of my head. It's 188 units. And when I met with our planner before she left for another position, her estimate was between 30 and 50,000 gallons a day for 188 units for Harbor Square. I spoke to the town engineer, Dan Ciarcia, to look at the numbers that were provided, and he said that the numbers that were used for these reports were within the standards, and they were used based off of the DEC regulations and New York State Health Department regulations, so they're pretty accurate. It's also going to depend on the irrigation on the site. You know, we know when a new construction site is built, and if it's a big footprint, there's going to be a lot of irrigation. Like when Avalon went on, we saw quite a bit of watering of the lawns and the plantings, but since then you could see that the demand went down after the second year.
Okay. Are you concerned at all with the Newcastle development that's near our watershed? Is it going to deplete our numbers? It's in that same aquifer?
See, they haven't provided us their watershed and the Sunshine facility has a well system. In fact, I used to operate that system when I was in the private sector. I believe it's about 1,200 feet away from our watershed or our Indian Brook water filtration plant. I need to see the topography and the engineer's reports that they have to see how it would affect the drawdown and how it does affect our safe yield. And
Okay, so there's a possibility, but we don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Andy touched on it real briefly, but it's worth reiterating, and it's drawn out in the conclusion a little bit. Andy and I have been interacting with your planning board engineering consultant, Dan Ciarcia, because he's had this same report. And one thing I want to draw to your attention as you maybe read it in more detail later is that it's really generated two ways, some of the estimated projections, but the consultant ended up relying more on the actual hard data versus the trending. The trending has some blips in it, particularly in 2007 where they show a drop in usage. Now, one thing that is leading us to kind of shy away from the trending and discounting that little drop in usage is in the process of doing all this rebuild that we did at the plant over the last 10 years, there was periods where we found process changes that we were able to do, like recirculating a lot of the water that we used to send to waste for the backwashes, which now recirculate back to the beginning of the plant at 150,000 gallons per day on some days. And then there were some things we found within the system and how it operates and how our storage operates, where there were overflowing tanks at times when the way the tanks were originally being filled. Right around the time we started putting in all that telemetry with level signals and sending signals back to us so we can see live 24-hour action of how these things operate, we found that some tanks were overflowing during the process because the plant had no communication with the distribution system. We were wasting 500,000 gallons every night at the Pleasantville Road water tanks. So, you know, those numbers, they are real, but they are not real in terms of potable water that's finding the end user. Some of it was going to waste in one way or another. So it was water that the village paid to produce as safe drinking water, but we're not realizing any return on that production. So that, you know, that's why some of those numbers could be skewed. That's why we're a little more, it's good that we have a nice broad range of data so we can discount points like that. Because if you used a point like that and actually created a trend based on a point that low early on with such a steep increase, the plant, I think Andy referenced it briefly, would be upwards of 15 million gallons per day as a design basis before you start out and construct, which is not what we want to do. This is what we're doing now is the value engineering component. Like he said, we're doing all those measures to figure out what's the plant that we need, but let's not build more than we need because they are expensive, and we're trying to build appropriately but efficiently.
Only because you were talking about the trend being low in a portion, but it looks like the trend numbers seem higher than the development numbers, so I'm confused by that. Maybe I'm not reading it correctly.
Right.
The projected averages and daily demand seemed higher on your trends than your steady growth. So I didn't all across, right? So I'm not sure. Well, he said 2007, but I don't.
Yeah, they are. I'm looking for the actual graph.
Here's on page,
No,
And what
I
is?
think it's figure 6.
Oh, I see.
I'm gonna find it. It's figure 9. Figure 9, so it's like
Figure 9.
future demand projections, trend based.
Okay, figure 9. Ooh.
So what the engineer was referencing here is you guys all set? You can see like the 2007, there's a dip where it goes down like, if you notice like from 2002 to 2007, these are this was takeoff of, these numbers were calculated of what is pumped out the door of the filtration plant. So prior to 2007, you could see that it was less, but that's when water was being purchased off Newcastle. So you can see these numbers drastically came up because we were producing our own water. So we were saving close to, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in purchased water, sometimes close to $1 million a year producing our own water. Now, the way the engineers looked at this, if they went from the point A to point B at the end and traveled and looking and transferring the numbers linearly through regression based off these years, the number would be much higher than if you just said, okay, let's look at what the town has. The town has Briar Commons and North State Road, it has Hawks Crossing, it has all these developments that are coming in, and they look at it and say, all right, every person uses 105 gallons per day, let's look at what the development number would be based on, compared to the trend. So the trend numbers were a lot higher than what the development numbers were.
And you're suggesting, sorry.
And
You're
my
suggesting
suggestion,
that it's not, looking at you guys trust the steady growth development numbers more than the trend because it was based on something that you thought wasn't exactly true?
it gets to be a point, if we follow just the trend numbers out, there's only a certain amount of real estate in the town and village that you could build on. So you said to yourself, at some point that trend has to end. The development ends much earlier than the trend.
I see. Yeah.
So that's why that made sense to the engineers and to us. It might be a number in between, but if we're as aggressive as we think we're going to be with the leak detection, then it could be lower. And obviously we know that if there's a 19% loss in the system, whether that's meters and a combination of leakage in the system, we're gonna really dial in on it. On this demand management program that I just received today, now this is a draft copy and I'll get it to your board as soon as it's finalized. They talk about what is being produced out of the plant and what's being built. The village uses 45% of what's put out of the filtration plant. The town uses 15%. 7% goes to the municipal use, which would be like this building, the community center, the firehouses, and some of the municipal buildings. The prison is using 14%, and what's not being accounted for through meters is 19%. So the low-hanging fruit is to go for what's lost before we go crazy building. And where we've broken out this report into different zones, there's 3 different pressure zones in our system, and we can look and see which zone has the most leakage, and that's the zone that in the last few weeks we've really concentrated on. There's no sense in just like saying let's start in the Torbank system when it's really close to what's being used every day and what's gone through the cash register of the meter. Whereas Lakeville in the town, some of Torbank's in the town, and also low service, which is a lot in the village, let's really concentrate on that. If you find a 200,000 gallon per day leak, we're purchasing water off of New York City at $1,800 per million gallons. So It's a contract that we signed for $14,800 about a month ago with a leak detection service. They will come in and pinpoint any leaks that we can't find ourselves. But it's kind of like, it's data loggers and it's bulletproof technology. White Plains has used this for the last 19 years and it's drastically reduced their consumption. So we want to look at both sides.
Just out of curiosity, what's the trend in the prison's water usage?
The last 2 years it's gone up. Quite a bit, and we will be speaking with prison officials about that. It's,
Well,
fun numbers.
one of the things that they have in their rate is an understanding that they use about 10%. And that's what we projected them to use way back when, whenever they decided on fixing their rate that they get billed. And now they're up to 14.
Okay, yeah. Just real quick, in 2011, they used 92 million gallons. In 2012, they used 147 million gallons. In 2013, 177. Prior to 2011, it was very steady state, so we've talked to them and they're using leak detection in their system too. But part of this New York City plan is to talk with the prison system and see what they can do to conserve on their side too. You know, that's,
It sounds
that-
like they almost doubled their usage in
Yeah.
a few years, from 92 usage to 100.
between, in 5 years.
5 years.
I know, I don't know. Push it, but maybe, I think it's when they're two on at the same time, is what the feedback is happening. So, with respect to finding where there's loss, and I think, what's 19% come out to, do you think? Did you say 200,000?
Oh, to.
How many gallons approximately do you think that the 19?
Well, the plant is producing an average of 3.5 million gallons a day, so 10% would be 350,000, so it could be 700,000 gallons a day.
Wow, okay.
Or 660.
Six, yeah.
But for the most part, I think you also said some unit, I mean, it's as high as 50 for some, but as low as 10 for, so really, we're not getting beneath 10% in terms of, because there's always going to be some loss along all the.
Inherently, just through the metering devices, we can see up to 5% loss through the filter plant just between reading these devices. You know, it's you know, these flow measurements are, it's hard to get every drop of water. Now, the one good thing is residential compound meter that are in houses turn much slower and they're more accurate than these meters that we're trying to catch 3,500 gallons a minute going through a facility versus a gallon per minute going through a meter. But there is, you know, water meters go slower, they don't go faster. So, you know, we have a meter replacement program. About every 12 years we change out the meters. We're halfway through the system. And when we develop these capital projects, some of our water relining projects, we'll take a whole street or section and we might put 400 meters in that year just in that project. And it's part of the project. So there is that loss, and that true loss you're not going to find out until you totally get every leak, but you're not going to get every leak in a system that has 150-year-old infrastructure and pipes.
Right, so I think what I'm trying to get to is what is the reality of how much of it you might get back, what that translates into gallons, and how does that boots on the ground affect you know, your capacity as we have more use of capacity and need for capacity due to various factors, including development on both the village and the town side. So if you recoup 5%, 6%, and that's, I'm not doing math tonight, but you know, 250,000 gallons in a day, or $300,000 gallons a day, but you have various developments that are at 30 to 50K. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what happens at that point where we've done it and now we're here and we haven't built a new plant yet.
Yeah, going back to what he said when he started his presentation, basically, it becomes a math problem. How much did we save through our conservation measures? How much is New York City gonna help us save by implementing some of their city-funded conservation measures? And then, how much are we gonna save, not usage-wise, but financially through our other capital projects that we're doing now, like the reconstruction of the spillway in the dam, which is gonna allow us to use more Indian Brook Reservoir water, and maybe bring in a different quality of raw water, which might help us put more through our existing plant. You know, there's lots of things that are at play right now, and they're all happening concurrently, and we really can't not do them now, because we need to do them in advance of the final design on the plant. So, you know, and only because you mentioned, I kind of snuck that in there, only because Andy mentioned the 1,800 plus that we're paying per million gallons from New York City. That's our big capital project. This next 2 or 3 years is going to be the Indian Brook Reservoir Rehabilitation Project, which is going to reconstruct the spillway to today's design standards and redo the intake chambers to pull a higher quality raw water out of our own free resource, if you will. Because right now, New York City, I think and Andy can correct me if I'm wrong, but since we've been here, they probably have doubled their per million gallon raw water cost to us. And there's no end in sight there, because New York City continues to build, and they have tremendous debt for the plants that they have been building over the last 10 and 15 years, like the UV facility and the plant down at Van Cortlandt. And that's not going away, and they're going to have to pay that off for a long time, long after any of us, and are working at least anyway. So, you know, that could be $2,500 in 5 years. So we want to pull as less as we can from New York City, and that all comes into play when you take a higher quality raw water out of Indian Brook. You know, the guys at the plant can use less chemical to treat it, or they have better settling characteristics that they pull out of the plant, which means they could put more through the filters maybe, and that's going to increase water production through the plant, allow us to run at those high-end, 4.5 to 5 MGD versus right now where we'll probably start choking the plant out around those numbers. So we're buying time concurrent with value engineering, and in 2 years, when we really have to fine-tune the size of this plant and the eventual bond and debt service that we're going to pass along to taxpayers, water rate payers, I should say. That's what we're doing now.
As I mentioned, I just want to make a note to our public, and at the Association of Towns conference today, we heard a lot about a lot of grant money as well as financing that's available through the state, and I know that we are already on a list, the
State revolving fund.
State revolving fund, or EFC, I think, the grant stream, but there's a number of different grant streams, including, cold cash and also through the federal government for water filtration and water infrastructure projects, so that it doesn't necessarily end up being all borne by taxpayers at the local level.
Yeah, we try to stay on top of it as much as we can. We go to the same conferences in our public works versions, and we hear a lot of the same presentations. I can tell you that unfortunately, we just received notification, and the reason we're commencing with this dam reconstruction project now and the spillway reconstruction is because after almost 2 years where we made an application that we were actually solicited to apply for by the DEC, the regulator that oversees this project and our earthen dam in Crotonville, and we handed it in at his behest. But 2 years later, they could turn around and said, we're not giving it to you. And that was through the FEMA grant money that they made available through the governor's office. And, now we can't wait anymore, because now, as soon as they said no, now they're back at our offices saying, when are you going to start? So, because for 2 years we've been telling them we're not starting because we're waiting for the grant money that you told us to apply for. But now they said no, so now they want to know when we're going to start again, which is, now we've been given the mandate of, Andy can correct me again, I think it's July 1st of this year, right, of award to a contractor, so.
Does Hazen and Sawyer help you with the grant stuff or not?
Yeah, they not, you know, they're very well entrenched in the system, within the state and a lot of the entities that oversee, and you have to go through to procure these grants, so they give us guidance, and then we do a lot of in-house stuff too.
I was going to say, I know firsthand that you guys are really good at looking into grants and finding grants, and unfortunately, the grant with respect to this particular project that we're talking about, while they say that money is available and they give a good talk, a lot of times there's very specific ideas about how those who are in charge of disseminating the grants want that money to go. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of need and a lot of places and they don't, but I appreciate the fact that I know that you guys work really hard at all of these things. First of all, I want to say thank you for this report. I want to say thank you for the information, and I know you do look at these things. And so my understanding now is you guys are looking at all ways to try and work this on many different levels at the same time as getting information, and then maybe 2 or 3 years down the line you really have more information about what type of plant you're going to build.
We actually, it's not final. We have a good understanding of the technology that we want, which is dissolved air flotation. It's the same as what New York City built, Newcastle built, Northern Joint Waterworks built. Hazen and Sawyer was picked as the consulting engineer because that's what they do, filtration plants. Our plant that was built in 1983 was sort of a package plant that was built that it was like pretty much like a boilerplate plant. But look at 30 years later, now you can't add on to it. We want to have the ability 50 years, 100 years to add on to this facility. So yeah, we're looking at that. And then Paul had brought up like water quality, for example. A month ago we were purchasing 90% of our water off New York City. Well, we made some adjustments at the plant with chemical feeds, and as of the last 2 weeks, we've been purchasing only 50%. You save over, $3,000 to $4,000 a day. Our average New York City bill is between $180,000 and $200,000 a month. This next one should be close to $100,000. So these are real changes we can make that really affect the bottom line budget. But logistically, we just have to be really careful how we forecast the size of the facility and how we move forward with infrastructure.
And one thing to add to Andy, I know he gave a list of people that Hazen and Sawyer had worked for, but it's not because they have it, so we want it. The dissolved air flotation as a process is done because our raw water treatment is best served by the dissolved air flotation technology. And that's why Hazen and Sawyer designed those systems in this area, because of the raw water from the Croton Reservoir responds best to that type of treatment versus what we have now, which is settling through flocculation, and that's that's going to allow us to produce more water for a cheaper cost too. Number one, and number two, you mentioned grants too. This report that Andy keeps referencing, the one that he said he's going to get to, that's through a grant, and the fruit of this grant-funded report is also going to be some potential grants to Austin residents to do some conservation measures in their homes. So that's that's a story to be told maybe next year, but we'll get there.
One of the things I learned at the meeting, that one of the classes I went to yesterday, was that some of that transportation infrastructure budget can be used for capital water projects, similar to what you're doing. They put a whole bunch of billions out there, and there are ways to make that appropriate for water. I went to one specifically on water. I got some information. So that's helpful, hopefully. And the other thing was, will any of the greener technologies that our developers and homeowners are doing, the water reclamation, using less water, help us in the end? Or are we looking at any of the building codes? Are we looking at any of the other things that even residents or developers can do to limit how much we're using? Will that help us in the end?
Do you want to talk about stormwater? Kind of relates to that. The conservation match.
Conservation, well, both stormwater and low use, when the developers hopefully are putting in the low use shower and the,
Yeah.
irrigation systems that aren't using our,
I can't speak too credibly about plumbing code and what they call for now, but I believe that's within the plumbing code that gets overseen by your respective building departments in the town and village, so that helps. You know, internally with things that are existing, when people call in now, if they think they have leaks, guys go out to the house within the distribution system and they'll listen and they'll give them some recommendations of what you can and can't do in their house. That's just part of, in the town or the village, that's what the distribution guys do. And as some of the construction measures that, that's kind of like a broad brush, the green approach to building. A lot of people do that because it's becoming cheaper, because it's been around longer. But some of the things they do that do help us with water, potable water, is the things that they do for their stormwater, helps with some of their discharge that they send back out to the watershed, particularly people that build within the Indian Brook Reservoir, because that sends a higher quality water to our reservoir, which means that when we have a higher quality raw water, it's cheaper to treat. So, it's not like a point effect, something that's like too grandiose as like one change, but when you do it, like in every single house around the Indian Brook Reservoir was built like this way. Like I'm sure Waterview, I don't know the details of the site plan there, but there are a lot of that neighborhood is in the watershed, so I'm sure a lot of their stormwater measures that are in place have the water treatment and pre-treatment things that you like to see in today's standard, where you don't get a runoff issue into the Indian Brook Res. And the Indian Brook Res is also, everything in T-Town is tributary to that. So it's nice, when we hear, even though we have very little to do with it, it's nice that we hear about, preservation possibilities over there and things in the watershed to Indian Brook. So things that are done in like GE, they're a neighbor to the reservoir. So, the things that they do there come in, and the town building department kind of keeps us in the loop about their discharge and their issues. So, but it's all about, taking care of the beginning, which is our source, and getting the most utilization out of that. In fact, when we're doing the project with the intake structure, we're also going to try to see how best we can cap the new top of the dam with the spillway to take as much storage as we can into that reservoir. That's really a great resource for us. I don't know if that really answered your question. I touched on a lot of things there, but
Some of the,
I know. Just wanna know.
our experience with green technology, we've dealt with it more commercially or industrially. We've installed variable frequency drives, which I think when I gave you a tour of the filtration plant, you saw it. Basically, it adjusts the speeds of the motors so that you run the facility steady state. It's not 100 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, 0, like running like a pump station. We run it only to the point of to keep our tanks, at the correct level that they need to be put at. But we control the speeds of these pumps so that it gives us better water quality, but what also saves on the demand charge from Con Ed or New York Power Authority. Every kW you save $5 to $20 per kW based on your facility. So if you can meet the end goal and you still have the same consumption but not have to get there so fast, it pays for itself. But one of the biggest things that we found that the variable frequency drives, which is really good technology, has saved is water main breaks. So instead of filling the tank fast and having the pumps hammer on and off, which causes quite a few water breaks, you just feed it nice and slow, fill the tanks, and then it shuts off slow. So that water break that we had a couple years ago, we had to issue boil notice for 7,000 people out off of Croton Dam Road. That was a blowout. The pump did not have a variable frequency drive. It had a check valve that failed. Since then, we put new check valves in and variable frequency drives. Some of this infrastructure, anything over 60, 70 years old in the ground, is cast iron, and cast iron will crack very easily. So we want to be as delicate as we can with the system, but that's like what green technology has done for us at the plant.
No, I just want to say thank you for the presentation.
you're welcome.
two things that I wanted. One is some information with respect to what is the transportation system, which is probably the worst way to say it, but piping and delivery system for any particular new development that's coming. Do we have the infrastructure in place? Is that something that it's fine, it's good, we're fine, or, I mean, I don't know if there are particular areas or just information on that. And the last thing I'm gonna ask you to talk about is, we're talking about water, and people are very concerned these days about water. So you might wanna maybe talk about how safe our water is and why it's safe, just because we just have, it's a national conversation these days, so.
That's a two-part, so I think we'll handle it that way. The first part of the question was relative to what do we have in the ground now, and I think the word you were looking for was distribution system.
Thank you.
So the distribution system that's in the ground now, as far as it reaches, is basically one big web, right, of pipes under the ground. And it is always a goal to have that distribution system web linked to one another, so you really don't have an end point. Now, every once in a while it's unavoidable, and you'll usually see a fire hydrant at that end point, and the guys go out there twice a year and flush the system for any water that's stagnant for a longer period of time, as in maybe more than a few days, not months, because the chlorine residual will drop in those sections of the pipe. So you don't like that. You like to get that all out of the system and bring in water that's potable water that still has a little bit of residual, so that's the safest water to drink. Plus, if things happen in the system over time, you want to flush it out. Like sometimes you have a break and you end up getting a little contaminated dirt into the system, so you flush that out. But the distribution system as it exists right now, I'll just be a little intrinsic here and say that, you know, if someone were to build anywhere within that distribution system now, it has the infrastructure to support what they want to build in a typical lot. Like if someone has a vacant lot outside in an existing neighborhood, typically the main that's in the street that the builder would have to tap into could supply that, depending on the demand from that structure. But in cases where it doesn't, and there are cases where it doesn't, it happens in the village and it happens in the town. And in my role as the village engineer and the engineer for the whole system with the Westchester County, I'm able to weigh in on applications in front of the town planning board and the village planning board, no matter what the development is. It might not, as long as it's a subdivision. Dan will call me, similar to, I'm trying to think, Jim Benoli used to call, and we used to have these conversations. This is what this person needs, what does your system have? And they ask for what's called an adequacy letter. And at that point, we get to look at it. And if there is a public works improvement that needs to be levied on the developer to facilitate his development, that's how you do it. You say, listen, this is great, but these are the things you need to do. If you're going to build this, you need to do this for your sanitary waste at the pump stations. You need, and that would come from your town engineer. You need to do this for your stormwater. That would come from probably both of us, because you know, we kind of work collectively there. We actually work collectively with sanitary as well, because everything that you guys produce makes its way through the village down to the county-run facility on the water. And for potable water, we call the shots, because it's our distribution system, and like Andy said, and he'll talk a little bit about that safety question you asked. We know exactly how much it produces and what's in the ground, what it can, and what exactly it could support on an adjacent development.
As far as safe, the water's, you know, it's as safe as it can be. We test for bacteriological sampling. That we have our own state certified lab at the filtration plant. But anything that requires like extreme difficult sampling or difficult testing, we outsource that. And there's a lot of checks and balances. We have the annual water quality report that we put out every year. Safety-wise, water main breaks, we have no problems with pulling the trigger on calling a boil notice. you know, people get really nervous about that kind of thing, but if I feel that there's any way that our water's contaminated, if there's any dirt that could have got into a pipe, or any viruses or anything, I will do it, which we did for 7,000 people. I mean, it was a big deal, but it was the right decision. That's it's safe and clean. And it's, as far as standards, it's 10 times cleaner than bottled water, so there's no reason why you shouldn't be drinking it out of your tap.
Can I ask you one question? Paul, just to clarify what you were just saying, so any new development would come to you and get effectively a will serve letter from you saying that you've got the capacity, or you'll say you need to do the following improvements in order for us to do it?
The development typically won't come to me directly, will come through the town's engineering representative, and it's actually a letter that is requested of that developer by the county health department, who's our regulator and our sanitarian for the system. So they say, okay, this is all well and good, Acme Development, to do this project right here, but before you continue, before we're gonna approve this subdivision, so before we're gonna let you file anything down in the clerk's office, we need to see all these things, and all those things include a letter of adequacy from the Village of Austin's engineer saying they can have it, because they even give you the legalese to put in there. They tell you, the village is willing and able and ready to serve potable water to Acme Developers, Inc.
And if you didn't think there was capacity, or like, how would that, would you ever say no?
Well, the county would step in and say, well, what are you gonna do? Not us, they would ask the developer, well, you're not gonna get water from the village if they can't supply you with what you need for whatever you need, fire protection, pressure, minimum pressures, you know, just general usage based on, you know, the 110 gallons a minute standard. I think that, depending on what the development is, that's a residential standard, but,
So like, as you're looking at
that's all
these-
part of it. Without that, they shouldn't get approval.
As you're looking at this, say we look at the steady growth development based projection, which is the one that you said, well, it's somewhere between the trend based and the steady growth, and the steady growth development based projection is the one that's based on developments that you sort of know about, or that have already come online, and
Yeah,
sort of
I
based,
think they're listed in there.
extrapolated out
Yeah.
from that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is there, you know, sort of as development continues or picks up in the village and the town, is there cause for concern? Is there cause to say, you know, we need to put the halt on development because we're not gonna be ready in time, or there's no place to get water to make sure that some of these developments, are, you know, can come online, or, you know, can you just give
Well,
us a
these-
little-
These projects listed in here, at least the ones that are future projects, are really just place cards. They're not, there's no contract there that says these people will definitely use this water by 2019, they're gonna start drawing from our system. You know, half those might come to fruition and half of them may not. And there might be 5 people lined up that we haven't even heard of yet, that are lined up in their place to do it somewhere else that would be reaching to us. So we're doing the things that we started off talking about in the beginning. Again, Andy kind of, he covered a lot of things, but one of the things he kind of blushed through was the, you know, the intermunicipal agreements that we're, you know, looking at doing now for possible supplemental water sources during our high use. We might not even if we signed an agreement with one of our neighboring municipalities right now, we might not need to draw water from them for 2 years because of the other things bearing fruit, like the conservation measures and the leak detection and the like. So, you know, it's really, you know, Andy's known for his belts and suspenders, and this is one of those examples.
I just want to clarify, because I think that there is concern about infrastructure, there is concern about, will we have enough capacity, but what you're basically saying is there's a system in place that would prohibit a development being built that there would be no water supply for.
Well, there's a system in place for us to say we can't give them water. Yes.
Yeah, so.
So if the development needed water and the approval of that is contingent on that, then yes, I would say there's a system in place.
Okay, thank you.
Without any other further questions, you guys want to move on to the next
the LED presentation?
Yeah.
Sure. The LED's a little longer. No, it's not. I'm just kidding. It's not.
Like those poor people. Can you tell us in 5 minutes?
I can. I probably can. So, again, some of you knew versus last year, but last year, I'll do a quick recap. The village and the town, so be it with different contracts, both retained Lumen Light Solutions, which is a partnership with Yonkers Contracting and Verdi Electric. They started a effort in New Rochelle, I think was their first municipality in Westchester, where they went to New Rochelle and said, or they did Yonkers and New Rochelle at the same time, I think, but New Rochelle was the entity that set out the municipal contract for everybody to tag along if they wanted to and use their bid documents as a sharing service, which satisfied procurement from your town comptroller because he reviewed it extensively. So the village and the town took advantage of that existing price points that New Rochelle had secured for particular LED fixtures on the Cobra heads, which are the ones that you see all replaced now, which were the ones that hang over and are designed to light the road only, and then maybe some, yeah, and then any other fixtures that exist within the municipalities. So the contracts were separate. The village chose to do an option where they were gonna pay off with a lease option the cost of all those installations through their documented savings on their NIPA bill. So that's what the village is doing. The town, because really on the recommendation from the existing supervisor's office and the town comptroller, chose largely in part because it's a much scaled down system. You don't have as many fixtures, so it really benefits the town not to pay that interest that the village will end up paying over their 7 or 8 year payoff. And last year, Tom just gave me this number now, so correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but last year the town passed a bond resolution for a not to exceed $200,000 limit, because that's what we projected. And the reason we had to do a projection like that is because we wanted to put a little contingency money into the project, because the town does not really have a standardized decorative fixture. You have a lot of different fixtures that have been put in over the last 20 and 30 years that really didn't jive with anything fixed. The village had it a little easier because the decorative fixtures that they put in have been standardized probably 13 or 14 years ago, because it was one of the things they did when I started, and I've been here a little longer than that, so every decorative fixture we put in is the same, so it was easy for us to pick the price point and how much it's going to cost. The town has 25, we sat a couple weeks ago with the supervisor and Maddie, and I think there's like 25 different versions of decorative fixtures that we have to figure out how to price and what the swap out's going to cost. But just to give you some numbers, actually I'll give you the villages too, so you can do a little comparison in your head. The total number of fixtures that were verified in the village were almost 1,400, and the total number of fixtures in the town were 345, which is good. It's right around where you can kind of picture it. And the nice thing about the town was that you wrote a contract based on your NIPA bill of 373 fixtures, because that's what the NIPA database, and these are rough drafts, so we still have to review these and field verify a lot of things. Your NIPA database had 373 fixtures, which is unfortunate for your past bills, which were higher than they should have been. But the nice part about both the village and town projects is that the consultant now will go back to NIPA and say, look, I think they're allowed to go back 6 years. I forget what your contract said. I think it's 6 years. They're able to go back and get 6 years worth of overpayment and solicit NIPA and Con Ed for a retro check. So we're expecting money on that end for some kilowatt hour projections, the fixtures use 274,000, roughly 274,000 kilowatts in your existing, and that's 256 with your actual usage. So that's how you, if you even your residential bill has that same calculation. Your wattage versus your rate equals your bill. So what they did so far in the town is they've installed 286 of the Cobra head fixtures, and that's why you see all LEDs in the town now on the roads, on the lights that light the road. There was roughly 20 or 30 decators that were defined in the NYPA bill, but last year this Lumen Light Solutions was asked to price out some in the park, so they're doing that. And then there was other ones that weren't on the NYPA bill, so you all have the benefit there, where you have some that weren't on the NYPA bill that you weren't paying anything for. So that all has, that's why I said this is draft, and it all has to be flushed out to find out the exact amount of money we're going to be trying to get back, if any. Because you have the option now to take if I extend those numbers out, if you take the kilowatt, your annual kilowatt hours that's billed, which is 274, versus what you will be billed once Con Ed and NYPA accepts the new numbers in your database, which is they use to derive your bill, it's going to be 81,000. That's a savings of 192,000 kilowatt hours per year. And if you take 23 cents per kilowatt, you would save about $45,000 a year just on the conversion. Now, the total cost of just the Cobra head, say you didn't touch the decoratives, which we're going to touch them, but just say you didn't, the total savings of $45,000 a year is going to pay off your Cobra head conversion, which costs, based on the fixture rate from New Rochelle, $113,000. So you're gonna pay, yeah, you're gonna pay that off in just about that time. Exactly, 2.5 years. I have to make my calculation.
And then going forward, it's all savings.
Well,
So
this is what we still have.
avoided costs.
All right, and this is what we still have to sit down and discuss. So they gave, like they said they were going to do, when I sat down with Maddie and the consultant, they gave us different fixture costs for all the different type fixtures you have. And I'll just, like you have that, if you can look at the really tiny picture, like you have that box fixture, and then you have that post light, and you have a couple of Hadcos, and you have that gooseneck. So you can see those things, and you have a couple that aren't even on there that, you know, it's like a hodgepodge. So a decision has to be made. What do you want to replace these with? We can make every hodgepodge still look hodgepodge, but in LED, and you'll still get the savings. Or you can kind of standardize it, and we'll talk about that. But what they did was they gave the unit costs that we talked about in our meeting last week. If the fixture to LED fixture, this is how much it will cost to put that in, because that's the difference between the $113,000 and the $200,000 borrow. All that fluff in there is for decisions like this, because we knew we were going to spend it somewhere. And then once we decided that, we can calculate the kilowatt hour projections for that unit, correct? Send it back to NYPA and say this is where we're going forward, and then we'll be able to project what the savings will be. And in both contracts, I'm not exactly sure how it's written in the town, because the town has the upfront payment, and I'll have to go over this with Tom. But in the village contract, if you don't see, the village next year will open up its bill, and they should see that savings reflected in their bill. If they fall short $1,000 and we owe them $10,000 for that payment, we only have to pay them $9,000, because they're guaranteeing you the savings through your bill. And the nice part about it all being kilowatt based is that, you know, NYPA's not just, I don't want to say they're not partners in this, but they're not going to take this without a rate increase. You know they're going to look to keep their bottom line. It is a, you know, corporation. They're gonna. Con Ed, I believe, already submitted to PSA, C rather, for a rate increase. And as they do that to make their bottom number, keep their bottom number intact, you know, our savings will be even more. I need those back, by the way.
Really quick question. At what point in the process would it be good to discuss any added possible requests for added lights that don't exist?
Three, same for where?
There were.
Hers.
No, I mean, there's some streets where we don't have any lights in the town.
Probably now. I mean, I'll tell you what we did. Some calls came in from the town, you know, like, and most of them through your office got directed to my office, and we kept a running log. Some of them they range from these, you know, these look great or these don't look great, but the ones that had something tangible, like, hey, do you think you could put a light over here? We check it out. We actually added one in the village, and what the contractor does is we went out there, we hung the stanchion arm for the contractor, because that's not in his contract, and he went and put a fixture there. And now we'll call up NYPA, just like we do when we hang any new light, and we'll say we have a new light at the end of Todd Place, which was a place where a few of the residents came in and said, listen, there's no light at the end of this cul-de-sac. And we went there and looked at it at night, and it was a little dark, so we said, this is a worthy complaint, and we put a light there. And once Con Ed comes and energizes it, it will work, and it will become part of our NYPA bill.
I mean,
That's the process.
I would definitely encourage if there are any areas that anybody knows about, to please call our office and let us know so that we can do that same kind of consideration for any place in the town. And the other thing I just want to mention is that we've also heard, these lights are very bright. So if you could just explain what the notion is about the directionality, how they shine, where they go, what can be
Okay.
done, if anything, if there are certain lights that are going into somebody's home, and, you know, what's the overall.
Is anybody complaining about that?
Well, here, the two main complaints are this. The village and the town, particularly the village, lots of hills, right? And the way these lights are designed to work is they basically cast a light that shoots left and right parallel with the road to light the road. That's what it's designed to do, is to light the right of way. It's not designed to light up someone's front yard, someone's house, someone's living room. But it's a very clean, bright light. At the same wattage is being produced by these as the light that you had there, but it's done a lot more efficiently, and it's a lot more directional. And if you go around at night, when you have like a little mist or fog in the air, you can almost see how directional it is. There's no real off lighting. There's no uplighting, which was nice when we made a lot of the earlier presentations about the dark skies that everybody was concerned with, about migratory patterns and things like that could be impacted. That's not an issue. And it won't be an issue with the decoratives either, because the decoratives are going to be directional as well. They're going to be cast down and light up the areas underneath where those poles and stanchions are located, as they're designed to do, which is typically like sidewalks or, you know, curbs or lawn areas and things like that. But some of the complaints that have come in is like when you're driving up a hill, if the light is not exactly, you know, it's hung like this and meant to be parallel to the surface of the flat earth, but if you're driving up a hill and you're driving like this and you look up at the light that's like this versus like this, and you get underneath it enough, it will catch you in the eye. So I think there's going to be some getting used to it. A lot of it, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it, is a personal preference thing. Some people don't like the way it looks, but hopefully it grows on them, because we don't really intend to change them back. And the other complaint, which was a lot less but was specific and things that we're doing about, is that some of them aren't lined up directly with the road, because just how the existing stanchion was. Now this contractor, like I said a couple minutes ago, was not retained to move the stanchions around. He was retained to hang the fixture on the existing stanchion. So one installation that's coming to mind, the stanchion was offset a little bit to light up an intersection, and there was a house right in the corner of that intersection where the light actually, if the road continued like the light beam, it would have ran right through the, I don't know which room it is, but it's a room in the house. So that room is pretty well illuminated from the street, which is not really the desired effect. So we're working around that, and you know, little by little we'll get to those little things.
And we did ask if there was any way to soften the light and basically.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah,
And part of the purpose is to actually make a brighter light on the road
Mhm.
for safety, and like you said, you know, the hills might be the issue,
yeah.
some of those complaints.
There's gonna be tweaking for months
Mhm.
and new light fixtures for months. And and once this contractor leaves and we're well into the, realizing the return on the investment, we can always go back at any time. These are not fixtures that are designed for Ossining, and when they go away, the fixture goes away. They're shelf item fixtures. We know the model numbers, serial number, we know exactly how to buy them. We're buying shelf, with some of the village's savings, we're gonna purchase some shelf fixtures, because we do maintain the town and village fixtures, as you know, through IMA, so we're gonna have those at the ready. And that's kind of one of the reasons I was kind of pushing to standardize in the town too, so we can be a little more responsive to issues out there. Which, by the way, all these fixtures have a 10-year warranty on them. So if anybody sees an LED light that's malfunctioning, they should report that as soon as possible as well, because those are under warranty for 10 years.
They should report it where?
Well, whatever they're comfortable with. If they want to report it directly, they can call Department of Public Works at 941, what's my number? 4660. But if they want to do it, whatever they're more comfortable, email the supervisor's office, the police, it all gets to our office one way or another.
Okay, but generally if somebody sees a light that is malfunctioning or out for any particular reason, at the end of the day, it is through the village DPW that would be rectified, correct? Even for the town?
Yes,
Because-
correct.
Because we have, and it's just information I'm trying to get out there.
Correct.
And just one other thing about standardizing of the fixtures is that it makes it easier to replace in a quick fashion, so it's kind of saves money in other ways too.
Yeah, just like any other
Right.
department, we like to have stuff on the shelf. Just,
Mhm.
light goes out, go get another light. It's in the garage, instead of ordering it and then someone doesn't have light in front of their house for 2 weeks because we had to order it.
Okay, anybody else, any questions? Thank you so much for
Thank
all of
you
this
so much.
great
Thank you.
information. I think it really helps us as we're continuing this evening to think about all the things before us. So we really appreciate all the work and explanation.
Thank you.
And next up, we're going to invite David Stallman to do a review of the comprehensive plan vision portion update. And David, I'm hoping that you can also give us a little bit of an explanation of what's in a comprehensive plan. Why do municipalities do a comprehensive plan? When was ours first initiated? What kind of updates have we had over the years between then and now? And most recently, what did the town undertake, and now where do we go from here?
Okay, thanks. To start with comprehensive plans in the town of Austin over the years, I believe there was a comprehensive plan done in the late 60s. There was not another comprehensive plan effort done until about 2000, 2001, and there was a plan adopted by the town board, by your predecessors, in September of 2002. Your learned legal counsel here, Steve Silverberg, will tell you that zoning must be in accordance with the comprehensive plan, and the thinking about the future often takes place in the form of a comprehensive plan. The Town of Austin's comprehensive plan, the one that was adopted in 2002, has two basic components. It has an existing conditions section and it has a vision plan section. The existing conditions section is kind of an inventory and analysis. You really want to know where you are at that point in time before you start thinking about where you'd like to be going forward. And it also gives the committee that's working on the plan an opportunity to become extremely familiar with the town by virtue of doing this inventory and analysis. So if you go to the 2002 comprehensive plan, you'll find that the first half of the document, roughly, is this inventory and analysis. And the areas that are covered in the existing conditions or inventory and analysis section include demographics, and by demographics, there were a whole variety of things looked at: residential population, racial composition, age characteristics, etc., etc. There was also a section on housing. There was a section on environmental resources, a section on the transportation network here in the town, and then a section on land use and zoning. And that was all in the effort to come up with a baseline in 2002 for where the town stood at that point in time. Once that was done, and that was the first portion of the plan that was done.
Sorry, I just have to ask a quick question and then we'll have
Sure.
So just a quick question. For example, the information that we just heard about the village and water, is that something that would sort of get back into that existing conditions study if we were to reevaluate some of that, or is that something that's sort of considered as part of that existing conditions when you first in 2002?
Right, I could actually see the discussion that Paul and Andy had fitting into the existing conditions section, and also sort of fitting into the vision plan section in terms of what they're planning on doing to accommodate more users, to have more water available, that kind of thing. So I could see it in both sections, really. So roughly a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, something like that, we started out to look at the vision plan portion of the 2002 comprehensive plan. We didn't go through the inventory and analysis section. We dispensed with that and went right into the vision plan portion of the comprehensive plan. There were many working meetings, there were many drafts of the various chapters, and there were public hearings at the end of the process before the town board concluded the seeker process, the state environmental quality review process, and then actually adopted the comprehensive plan, or the updated vision portion of the comprehensive plan. And there are 7 chapters that comprise this vision plan: community appearance, environmental resources, residential development, parks and recreation, community services and facilities, transportation, and future development and redevelopment. And I've put together a bit of a PowerPoint presentation regarding the future development and redevelopment chapter. That's the chapter that has, it's the chapter that primarily deals with planning and zoning and land use going forward. I'd be happy on perhaps some other night to talk extensively on the other 6 chapters, but tonight we've got this presentation regarding the development and the future of development and redevelopment chapter. So, is that the, okay. So, this is the chapter we're going to talk about tonight. And to use your term, Dana, we're going to unpack this chapter tonight. There's one overarching goal for this chapter, and it's to promote development and redevelopment which is consistent with the current scale and historic character of the community, which encourages a balanced pattern of land use, which allows for the efficient provision of utilities, public services, and facilities, such as what Andy and Paul were talking about, which concentrates business activity within the existing commercial areas, which preserves residential neighborhoods, and which protects environmental resources. So everything that's in this chapter fits into this framework. And then there are 3 objectives, and then there are a number of specific implementation strategies. So the first objective is to limit the amount and intensity of land use development to levels which minimize traffic congestion on area roadways, which encourage use of transit, which protect environmental resources, and which are appropriate to the town's scale and character. And then the specific implementation strategies include: the town should review the density provisions of the zoning law to determine whether modifications should be made. And we did some of that last year in the form of a local law or a number of local laws that were adopted by the town board before year's end. The town should analyze the appropriateness of the uses currently permitted in the General Business 1 zoning district. And this is a zoning district that you see as you're driving north, about to cross the Croton River. You look over to your right-hand side, you see a lot of trucks. That's the GB1 zone. And years ago, that GB1 zone permitted all of the uses that are permitted in the GB district on North State Road, but also storage and warehousing. The GB, and the reference is still made to the GB district on North State Road, but that district on North State Road has been expanded in terms of the uses that are permitted. It's been expanded substantially as a result of the comprehensive plan and implementation of the comprehensive plan. So now we've got to look at the General Business 1 zoning district to essentially take uses out that are appropriate for North State Road but wouldn't be appropriate down by the Croton River. Another implementation strategy, the town should consider changing the zoning classification of the Maryknoll Seminary and adjacent undeveloped properties from R40, which is roughly about an acre, to 2-acre residential. And that zoning, the 2-acre residential, would be consistent with the adjoining zoning in the town of Newcastle. And if the Maryknoll Seminary property were to be sold to a private developer, the 2-acre zoning would be the new underlying zoning and would limit the amount of development that would take place on that property. Another implementation strategy, the town should evaluate the bulk regulations of the zoning law to ensure that oversized homes are not constructed. The town should consider changing the zoning designation and permitted uses for the General Business 1 and neighborhood commercial districts in the Crotonville area to the one of the one-family residence districts. So this is a recommendation, and you'll notice that in every case it says the town should consider, not the town should absolutely do this, but the town should consider making the commercial uses in the Crotonville area non-conforming uses, which would eventually go away, and then it would leave the Crotonville area as entirely residential. So this is something that could be explored and might be implemented. The town should consider changing the zoning of the steeply sloped area which descends to the Croton River on the western side of the General Business 1 zoning district in Crotonville to open space or conservation. And lastly, the town should be open to an analysis of the zoning of the underutilized and non-conforming Stony Lodge Hospital property so that this property can be adaptively reused or redeveloped in a manner that is feasible and which protects surrounding neighborhoods and environmental resources to the maximum extent practicable. And you'll notice that this really doesn't talk specifically to density, but it talks about the framework within which this property should be analyzed. So the second objective in this chapter on future development and redevelopment is to support North State Road and other business areas in the town so they remain economically vibrant and continue to provide the community with a mixture of businesses, services, and pedestrian activity. And then the specific implementation strategies include the town should update the zoning law to define all of the uses and terms in the law, specifically with regard to the General Business zoning district and the uses that are permitted in that district. The town should define and identify appropriate standards and locations for cabarets, restaurants with music, and bars. The town should evaluate the buffer and setback requirements for commercial uses adjacent to residential areas to see if the provisions need to be updated. And I think you're all familiar with the fact that North State Road and that corridor, that General Business corridor, is very narrow and immediately abuts residential development. So we should be looking at the setbacks and the buffer requirements to see whether they're substantial enough. And then the last objective in this chapter is that the town should preserve the integrity of historic, architectural, and archaeological resources and protect the community's heritage for the education and enjoyment of current and future populations. And the manner in which the comprehensive plan says the town should do this is that, number one, the town should encourage the Ossining Historical Society or the Ossining Town Historian, thank you, Dan, to seek assistance, guidance, or sponsorship from the Historic River Towns of Westchester, the Preservation League of New York State, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and county historic groups in scheduling educational meetings about historic preservation issues and opportunities. Secondly, the town should continue to incorporate information about historic resources on its website and have material available at public buildings. And lastly, the town should seek to protect its historic buildings and encourage their creative reuse as opposed to their being taken down and just redeveloped over the top of them. So that is the future development and redevelopment chapter.
Thank you.
Was there anything, Dana, you wanted me to cover that I didn't cover?
I guess I want to talk about the process of, again, we talked a little bit about something.
Can you turn on the lights?
Oh, the lights, sorry. I'll get it, okay. Thank you. Little few minutes already. She said, I'll get it.
And
Still
just,
low?
can you turn off the projector too?
Yep.
Thank you.
Good. So just in terms of, again, in terms of processes, so, you developed the plan last year, over the course of a year and a half. I think the planning board had a seat at the table, the zoning board had a seat at the table, the environmental advisory committee had a seat at the table. I think the town board, there were multiple public hearings, so everybody had an opportunity, the public had an opportunity to sort of weigh in on the plan. And it's my understanding from just my brief training that I've received that the comprehensive plans are supposed to really be your sort of your roadmap, and then you kind of test everything against that to make sure that you're in keeping with your roadmap. So you kind of say, okay, well, we want to make sure that any new development takes into account our the historic nature of our community, that we don't impede on any of our natural resources within these measured, kind of laid out boundaries of to what extent we can do it, to what extent we cannot do it. If we want to have additional open spaces, that we make sure that we retain a percentage of open spaces, and that we, and again, then, so when something comes before the planning board, they're supposed to kind of be turning back to the comprehensive plan to say, well, does this actually fit in? Can you just, kind of comment on how it works? I mean, we sit in on all the planning board meetings. Do you feel like the planning board has a good sense of sort of the new vision statement? And if not, and is that something that would be helpful as they move forward? We have a number of plans, it seems, that have come up, developers have come up in recent years who are presenting projects that may be in a sort of a small space in our in the town. How does the planning board sort of think about those holistically, thinking about all of the different pieces, and how does that relate to the comprehensive plan? If you could comment on that a little bit.
Sure. Okay,
just a couple questions.
Well, I think that what really needs to happen, and this has happened over the years, is that the implementation of the comprehensive plan is really very important. And I'm going to guess that the plan sat on the shelf for quite a while when it was adopted in 2002, and then it was picked up at some point in time, and a number of the recommendations in the 2002 comprehensive plan were actually implemented. Zoning was changed, and the best way, I think, to make sure that the comprehensive plan is utilized is to actually implement the recommendations that are contained in the comprehensive plan. The planning board is an administrative board. I think they're pretty well aware of the policy in the town, but they go mainly by the various chapters of the code as opposed to looking at the comprehensive plan each time. But if, let's take a case in point, one of the recommendations or one of the implementation strategies was to look at the North State Road zoning to see whether the buffer requirements and the setbacks are substantial enough, and to see whether we should make them more substantial to protect the residential development more. And if it's determined that they should be more substantial, that would actually be put in the zoning law, which is a chapter of the town code, like the subdivision regulations and the tree protection law and the wetland protection law and the steep slopes law. And it's those chapters that the planning board actually ends up using more so than looking at the comprehensive plan. I mean, they can look at the comprehensive plan, they do look at the comprehensive plan, but being an administrative board, they look to the chapters even more, I think.
So, I mean, basically what you're saying is our job now to sort of take the plan and take these recommendations and kind of go through them one by one as a board and make a determination of if we want to make changes to our town code, and you know, and if not, then no, and that would be sort of how, you know, how we would move forward. So, and how does that intersect with what's, you know, already before some of our planning boards that I'm turning here to our council? If you could comment on that a little bit, Steve.
Well, I mean, right now, as David said, the planning board is bound by what's in the zoning code. So if somebody comes to the planning board and says, I want to build a two-story office building, and that's permitted, and they meet all the setback requirements and the other things, the planning board has to process that application. If somebody is coming forward with a zone change, for example, and one of the recommendations, and coincidentally I noticed there is a recommendation relating to a particular property here, to look at the zoning on that property, that might be a good time to look at the zoning on that property and determine whether or not the proposed zone change is appropriate. But other than that, you can either go at it in a wholesale way and just take all those recommendations and ask somebody or you study all of them, and it would be a huge amount of work, I think, frankly, for the town board to do that. So I think what you really need to do is look at that list of recommendations, prioritize them, and then perhaps ask your consultant to give you recommendations. Because I'm not sure that you're in a position to say, okay, you know, we think the building requirements for this particular district are not appropriate. You're not going to sit, I think, and start saying, okay, well, the setback should be 35 feet instead of 25 feet, and the height should be 3 stories instead of 2.5. You really need somebody to help you sort through that. But absent doing a complete review of everything that's listed on there, which probably would take a huge amount of time and be rather costly, I think we need to set some priorities on what makes sense from your standpoint to look at first.
Just one other comment to piggyback on what Steve said, because you were talking about what's on the agenda now. Kim and the prior town board adopted 6 local laws toward the end of the year. One was creating an architectural review board, and it's actually the planning board that now sits as the planning board and the ARB. And there were 5 other local laws that improve the tree protection law, the steep slopes law, subdivision regulations, the wetlands protection law, et cetera, et cetera. So some of what is recommended in the comprehensive plan got implemented around the same time the comprehensive plan update got adopted. And this isn't a legal opinion, but those amendments apply to every project on the planning board's agenda currently. So none of those projects have any vesting in the prior regulations. They all have to meet all the amendments.
So, I see in the residential portion, for instance, so we just went through what portion did we just?
Future development and redevelopment.
Future development, and that portion said, I don't have it in front of me, I have it on my phone, so do you have the other, you kind of took my copy from me, I think, yeah.
Oh.
Well,
I don't know.
no, I did that, mine. Mine.
What chapter,
So,
Kim, are you reading
What
from?
G was future development and redevelopment,
Mhm,
and you went just through that, and the first, these were objectives that have not been yet implemented.
Well, there are objectives that are going to shape whatever happens going forward. The goal, that overarching goal,
Yes.
and the objectives are probably going to remain goals and objectives. It's really the implementation strategies that makes up the to-do list.
I see. So it says the density provisions of the town zoning chapter have not been analyzed to determine, so that would be one of the implementation strategies?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the goal says to promote development and redevelopment which is consistent with the current scale and historic character of the community and encourages a balanced pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I also notice that under residential, the goal is to preserve the quality, character, and stability of neighborhoods in the town of Ossining, and an objective is to protect residential zones from the intrusion of incompatible uses by equitably enforcing the local zoning and building codes.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are implementation and strategies about evaluating the zoning and the code enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So, at this point, what we're saying is that the planning board can implement what exists in front of you as codes and zoning laws, and that in order to further any of these types of goals, there are these particular roadmap implementation strategies
Mm-hmm.
that we should look at. And in order for these things to affect anything that we have potentially going on, or that we have to implement these soon or in some way in order for them to be adhered to for the future for anybody
Mm-hmm.
who comes.
Sure, the sooner the
Forward.
better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, I think I would just suggest to our town board that we have to take a look, I mean, at what it is. You continually say that the comprehensive plan is the roadmap, so I guess
it is.
that's
Great. So I think that, so in other words, what I was hoping, and which I think we achieved, by hearing a little bit more and presenting back to the public what was some of the work done, was that, I think it was a very thoughtful and very considered process, but now there's more work to be done. So how we do, what the time frame is to actually, Steve said there's a lot of work to be done to actually get at, okay, well, we still have to look at things, so there's still work to be done. So, we could, go back to a planning consultant, or we could determine how much work that is, and we could, put out an RFP for that process, so we can kind of spread a bigger net to see if we also can get some other, input about that, and figure out, how we want to move forward to go through this implementation strategy process to, figure out, okay, well, what is it exactly that we should be doing? And we may say, get some kind of recommendation as to how long that might take, and then, to prioritize, which pieces of the the visioning part of the plan are of immediate concern that we need to do this right now. Either tie into some of our infrastructure concerns or tie into the character of our communities or whatever it is that sort of collectively with our public and with the board we feel like should be the next steps. So what we may want to do is get a little bit public feedback in advance to kind of determine what the public feels about that, and then kind of go from there as a jumping off point for the next steps. And how we go for, move forward. And we may want to determine that we want to say, we might want to put a little hold for a period, a defined period of time on what does get presented to the planning board while we're in that period where we're making a determination about how these strategies are going to be implemented for the town. So I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on what you guys think we should do, but that that would sort of be my feeling in terms of the next steps would be to kind of feel like if we go out and either do some kind of a public opinion survey or a town hall meeting to say, okay, here's our thoughts of what we really need to look at based on what the work was done, and then get a little bit of public feedback to help us determine what collectively we believe next step should be.
I know I'd like to get public feedback on the Stony Lodge development, and we're about to get a nice presentation on what's proposed, so I think that'll be helpful. I'd really like, can you hit that button? Okay. I'd really like to hear from the residents, and I've been asking some of them already what they think. The Crotonville area is interesting to me. I'd like to hear from residents what they'd like. I'm not necessarily sure that they don't want to be able to have a deli nearby or whatever. So I'd really like to get be able to ask them what they'd like in that area and if they want those businesses there or not. So I think getting feedback from the community is really important at this point.
I think the roadmap is good. I think that we have this roadmap about how to go about what the goals are, what the implementation is, and I think, in order for us to really dig into both what the public believes, what the town board believes in terms of the best way for this community to go forward in connection with these goals, that, it makes sense to look at this, and in doing that we have to kind of hold on, because while things are happening, once things happen, they happen. That's it. They're done. They cannot be undone. And so I think that's a great idea for us to do that.
I think there's been a tremendous amount of work done previously, and I think that, now looking back almost 15 years later, it makes sense to go back and revisit and make sure that we're still on the path we want to be on. Getting public opinion is always a good idea. I just want to make sure as we do this that we recognize that nothing exists in a vacuum. So we do have to consider things that are in the pipeline. We do have to consider moving things forward in tandem with smart planning, and I don't think those things are necessarily mutually exclusive. So I would be, I just think it's important to understand that we can't, as much as we want to do a thorough job, which I completely am supportive of, we don't want to do anything that would impede economic growth and development, which is also very, very important for the town.
I agree. I think there are things that are already in the pipeline that are adhering to what is the current law of the land, and so that it is what it is. And I mean, I could speak, I'd like to probably ask Dave, if you have somebody who's in front of the planning board for 2 years or a year and a half under, been through, all the verbiage, but whatever, how many site plans, or in the process of a secret review based on, a particular, the current codes and zoning, and far along in that process, I think you know, that goes on, that goes forward, that moves in a way. I think we're probably talking about, where there might be changes. Maryknoll, we talked about, you know, there's a conversation about possibly changing the residential footage on that. You know, maybe nothing's there yet, but just kind of going ahead. Or something that, you know, may be coming up, and there is a conversation about changing of zonings, of current zonings, and how that, and that. So I think I'm not thinking about impeding, you know, progress, and I think there are things that are gonna keep going, but I think that we, in terms of time being of the essence of making changes so that we do preserve the thought process of the goals, I think that's extremely important.
Steve, did you want to say something?
Or Dave, did you want to say
No.
something?
No, I was just going to say that I think, you know, what was suggested of getting some input from the public, and then this board prioritizing what you think needs to be done, and getting some sense of how long it would take to do that. And then in that context, if you think it's appropriate to take some stopgap measure in order to implement something specific, you know, then it makes sense to do that. But I think you need to kind of have a path first before you jump into that.
And to work on the various chapters, primarily the zoning, does take time. You know, nothing happens in a couple of months.
I thought you were going to say that you could just do the whole thing in about 2-3 weeks.
I can do it in the car on the way home, I think. And I think, Kim, perhaps what you were saying is there are projects on the planning board agenda, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you perhaps don't want to pull the rug out completely from under the projects. They will have to comply with the amendments that were made at the end of last year. None of those projects were grandfathered in any way, shape, or form. So they're going to have to comply with the new wetland definition and everything else that was included in those 6 local laws. And there are properties like the Maryknoll property where, you know, nothing is being proposed right now, but you want to make sure that if and when that property is sold to a developer, it doesn't catch you unawares, and you've provided for the proper underlying zoning for that property.
And the planning board is keeping with all the new wetlands and waterways, like for example on Hawks Avenue. The planning board is right on top of protecting the waterway and the stream and all that, right? That's already in all our codes and.
On Hawks Avenue?
Mhm. The one between the Deerfields.
Oh, yes.
There's
Yes.
a waterway right through that. I
Yes,
just want to
yes,
make
yes,
sure
yes.
that that's adequately being looked at. And
Yes,
I know I have to have a conversation with the planning board, which I haven't done yet.
yes. As a matter of fact, the planning board has...
Oh, I'm not allowed to. Okay, well, that's good.
The planning board is using an ecological and environmental consultant on both that project, which is called Parth Knolls, and on the artist project on North State Road.
Right.
So it's enlisted the services of a special environmental consultant just for that purpose.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can I ask you about that? Artists, they are, the setbacks were not part of what was implemented, correct? Did we do
There
we didn't do
weren't any
setbacks.
changes to...
So they're only complying with what exists, not what was possibly, as a suggestion for implementation, correct?
Right.
And so.
The GB district dimensional requirements were not touched last year.
So I have a general question. If you request a developer to maybe think about doing something that's more than or outside of the code, they can if they want to, or can they, or that's not something that can be requested?
Well, it's a little more complicated, I think. than just sort of a yes or no answer.
Okay.
But in that case, you know, you've seen a site plan of that building probably, and the back of that building could have been proposed as sort of a monolithic element 30 feet from the property line. And there are almost courtyards built into the back of that building. So I think the planning board has looked at the architecture along the back of that building as favorable and something that the applicant didn't have to propose.
Okay, but I don't know if that answers the question I asked, which is,
If the setback is 30 feet, can you say we want it to be 45?
can the planning board ask, not require? Because
Yeah,
it's not
planning
in the
board can
code,
certainly ask,
But they can.
sure.
David answered the question.
The only thing that I would want to say about soliciting public opinion is that in soliciting public opinion, I think it's about, I don't think we want to talk about specific things that are before the planning board. And I think we just need to be careful as board and as individual board members that we aren't going and trying to go out and impede the process and or not keep an arm's length distance from that we're supposed to have from the planning board. I think if we look at, you know, the sort of umbrella vision of the town as part of this process and how, again, how does that, you know, this roadmap lead us into a direction to determine if we do want to make changes to zoning or do want to make changes to, you know, to any of the, you know, any of our codes, that's fine. And that's how we should be asking for public input, not on specific developments, in my opinion.
I don't, to the fact that we're about to hear from the development that wants to go where Stony Lodge is, I think because that is a request for a zoning change in front of this board, that is a specific thing where I actually do believe we should get public input.
Well, we're gonna talk about that after,
Right.
after we hear that, but I'm just saying what I was talking about before.
Well, yeah, with
Going out
respect,
to the public in terms of that, yes. And then, I think what one of the other things that's sort of before us to determine is lead agency on this project, that we're gonna be hearing a presentation on. So I'd like to discuss that after we hear the presentation. So, I think that if everybody's good, I think we should close the conversation on our comprehensive plan. I think we have a plan to move forward on that. Thank David Stallman very much for your help in guiding us through the unpacking. And then invite our next presenter, Glenn Benchmile, to talk about River Knoll. Is there an S or not? No S.
No.
No, River Knoll.
have to
And
put in
you can
a,
give us all the heads up and then we'll talk about that. And I'm gonna move again, and we're gonna do the
I also
switcheroo.
wanted to say to the lighting guys that in my town, I live in southern Westchester, and they're relamping with LEDs, and I asked the head of DPW if he could dim it, and he said the type of lights that they're buying have 3 levels of brightness.
Within the same fixture?
Yeah. You didn't buy that version? Anyway,
Do you want to?
because it was too bright.
Which light do we hit again? Perimeter. Perimeter. Okay, thank you.
I hope it works. And this does click right? Not click? Okay. All right. My name is Glenn Veteran. Oh, gosh. I wrong clicked. Do I close that?
Yeah. Is your name on one of these slides?
It is.
Okay.
All right. Huh. Left click?
Are you left clicking?
River Knoll is the proposal we have for the Stony Lodge Hospital site to readapt it. And this is a view of the entrance that we're proposing. I'm Glenn Vetramile, and I was trained as an architect and also have economics. Oh, I'm sorry. Everybody was probably reading ahead on the left side. And I've been in the development business for about 30 years. I was an executive with the Related Companies. It's a large development firm in New York, and they're known for those two large projects, in particular, Time Warner Center and Hudson Rail Yards. I started my own firm about 7 years ago, and I focused entirely on upscale residential communities in the tri-state area, and I place a lot of emphasis on design and construction, and this is a project that I have under construction. It'll be finished in June. It's a project in Tuckahoe, New York, and it's a very highly designed luxury rental with a lot of amenities. Not proposing this style in particular for this site, but this gives you some indication of the quality of design. It's under construction, recent construction, photos of the project. So the Stony Lodge site is 18 acres. It's very large. It is kind of the breathing room and park for the surrounding fairly dense residential communities to the south, east, north, and then larger lot homes here. It has expansive meadow along Croton Dam Road, and expansive meadows and trees, a lot of larger diameter trees here. The site is comprised of a bunch of buildings that are defunct. The property shut down approximately 4 years ago. The main building, the north building that you see on the top sort of promontory, has been added onto over the years with very inconsistent architecture. This is a building from the east side, from Narragansett Avenue side, some of the front of it, parking areas adjacent to it. This is the recreation building to the north end of the property, and this is the facade that faces Grandview Avenue homes. Another side of it. The north building, that's another it's a building that was housing of some of the children at the site, admin building, and the south building. One of our goals is to preserve as much of the open space of the site. About 2/3 of the site will remain open. And these are design mandates that I imposed on my design team. The preservation of the Croton Dam Road meadow, which is about 1,000 feet in length. We're calling it the West Meadow. The preservation of the Narragansett side and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenues meadow, East Meadow. The creation of a new Pershing Avenue buffer, the south end, and the creation of a buffer at the north end of the site as well. All the buildings will be clustered to the center of the site, and all the buildings will be lower than the existing Stony Lodge Hospital structures. And we will maintain the existing and only access point on Croton Dam Road, and state-of-the-art stormwater management basins will be at 3 locations around the site that will greatly improve runoff, most particularly to the south end of the site. And again, so this is the meadow facing Croton Dam Road. It's beautiful. We're not going to touch this. Another design scheme would probably use all of that, but it's got this beautiful post and rail fence, and the property rises here with a mature stand of trees. All of those will be preserved as part of our scheme. Another view looking back towards Croton Dam Road. All of this will be preserved. From the entrance drive looking north, all of this will be preserved. And then this is the what we call the East Meadow. This will be 5 acres with Narragansett Avenue and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd over on this eastern side. Another view, all of this is preserved, and all of this is preserved, and all of this is preserved. This is the sledding area that goes down towards Narragansett and the park. All of that will still be there, and everybody can still sled. An area that will be restored as open meadow. And then we do have a number of larger diameter trees, 10 inches or greater, and to the maximum extent possible, we're going to, we're in the process, as soon as the snow goes away, of plotting those on our survey and to keep them. We do have oblique views to the northeast of Maryknoll, and then we have views to the south from the uppermost levels out to the Hudson River. Again, just restating the design objectives. So then getting into the specific plan, we have Croton Dam Road. This is the existing entry point. And we're talking about a loop that would come up to the main. This is where the existing building sits now, all in here. And we would have an entry feature here. All of the existing stand of trees on the hillside stay. We have a stormwater management basin here, second one here, and a third one. All of these basins, any of the pervious surfaces, hard surfaces, will all be channeled into these basins. So any the runoff will be improved greatly. The bright green areas, this is an overlay of the new buildings over the existing buildings. That's the existing main structure, but there are all these other structures, and all of those will be taken down, and all of those will be now green. So all of these buildings, a new green buffer to the north, a new green buffer to the south. And all of this area here, all wrapping around, all throughout here, all throughout here, and all throughout there. My hand's not very steady. Will all be green. This is a cross section. Croton Dam Road over here, Narragansett here. The existing building is, you can see that dotted line? And then I told my architects you have to stay underneath it. And so all of the buildings will be below it. If you're, can I back up?
Right click and previous.
Okay. So there are larger lot homes across the street on Croton Dam Road. Some of them sit behind a hill. None of them will have any views of this building. There's a big stand of trees in between, some along Croton Dam Road. And similarly over Narragansett 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, there are existing stands of trees. That open meadow where the toboggan run is kind of in there. And then stand of trees. You'll have at most minimal oblique views of the property. And this was specifically told to my design team to do it this way. So this was an option. This is a grid, essentially a 1/4 acre or 1/3 acre grid of houses that could alternatively be built on the site. And I thought this was important to see that all of the stand of trees here, that beautiful meadow, same thing to the south, same thing to the east. All of those trees would go away. All of those meadows would go away. You'd have many more roads, much more infrastructure, much more less less ability to have a park, which is essentially a park for the people that surround it. It's the fresh air for the people that surround it. Our proposal is for 86 market rate units, 1 bedrooms, 83 2 bedrooms, and then required by the town, affordable. And every unit will have a minimum of 2 parking spaces, underground, at least 1 underground space under the building, and then some surface parking, and we also have some garages. And I would say it's a contrast to, and I don't like to minimize other projects, but the Avalon project, which is your most recent project in town, has no parking underground. You park on surface lots, you walk across lots, irrespective of the weather, whether it's raining or snowing. Could have a bag full of groceries, could be late at night. You don't have the security of going into a garage and coming up through into your lobby and into your unit. So these are some of the amenities that we're proposing. Again, parking that will be in garages that will be with a gate that will come down after you enter. They'll be lit and very secure. You'll go into a entry vestibule up into the lobby, and then from the lobby you'll go up to your various floor. We are proposing an outdoor pool, a large terrace, gardens. We have what we call an outdoor kitchen. It literally has a refrigerator, cooktops, whatever, so if you want to entertain on a weekend, you can do that. We have gardens that we're planning throughout that area in the front. We're proposing a state-of-the-art large fitness center. We will have a yoga studio and planned classes. We have a club room, which will be a meeting place, and it'll have separate television viewing area, and alongside it a business center with Wi-Fi copying services and some desktop computers. We're talking about a dog spa because, you know, dogs, particularly in this market, we think will be popular with some of the renters because we have so much land. It's easy to envision people wanting to walk their dogs in the property adjoining the project. And so I've worked on a project in the city. It's called Mima. It's on West 42nd Street, and we literally have a dog spa so that you can go to work in the morning, drop off your dog. There's dog sitting, dog counseling, but grooming services. And it's, can't tell you how popular it is. And it's surprising how many people come specifically to that building because of the dog services. We have a concierge planned today with Amazon and all of the packages we're all getting. All of these package storage rooms are becoming huge because, you know, daily packages, so the concierge will accept your packages, dry cleaning, and of course monitor your home if you are going away for some period of time for vacation. And then we are proposing a jitney service. We're very sensitive to the concerns of traffic. And so at peak hours, we will have a jitney service taking residents to the Ossining or Croton stations and potentially looping through the business district. This is some views of the landscaped areas of the project that I showed you down in Tuckahoe. And this is that outdoor kitchen that I talked about with a, you know, eating area, a water feature, some of the things we may or may not do, but I very much enjoy the design aspect of this. So the homes, we have only 1 or 2 bedroom homes. The ones are on average about 750 square feet, and the twos, that's wrong, they're about 1,100 square feet, excuse me. And some of the twos may have dens. Each home will have, again, a minimum of 1 underground parking space. I like a lot of windows, so they're always bright. I put a lot of time into thinking about how every unit looks and orients to its various vistas. We have hardwood floors in all the living areas, and then closed loop carpeting in the bedrooms. Keep them quiet. All the appliances are stainless. We have a washer and dryer, sometimes side by side, sometimes stacked in each unit in its own closet. And then the countertops will probably be quartz style countertops, a little more contemporary. And then each unit has its own water heater. So today's apartment communities have really evolved. They are, for many people, particularly the millennials, the preferred way of living. They come in all different shapes and sizes and qualities. The technology and materials, exterior finishes, concrete construction has allowed all different types and forms. You go into Manhattan, you're almost amazed at what can be built today. They become great time savers with our very busy careers, and families with 2 wage earners. You know, we just have much less time available to do the standard requirements of maintaining a home. And all of this is done professionally in my projects. Professional cleaning staff, professional security staff, landscapers. I really stay on top of this, and that's what really separates certain rental communities over others. Apartments today, particularly in Westchester County, are also a means to relieve people from real estate tax burdens. Real estate taxes as a percentage of your tax have risen precipitously over the last couple of decades, continue to increase, and if you're an empty nester, your kids are flown the coop, as mine have 2.5 years ago. The thought of getting out from under that tax burden, apartments give you that opportunity. In many cases, the tax burden is equal to the cost of renting. These communities provide a great sense of gathering, very popular with empty nesters, people whose children have gone away, with singles and retirees, because you now have, instead of your children around you, very close neighbors. They're very safe and secure. Again, the garages that are gated, lit, entry alcoves that are gated, and of course the concierge services that have obvious security cameras at key locations to just make sure everything is buttoned up. They provide flexibility in terms of travel in particular. You can close your unit, tell the concierge you're going to be away for X number of dates, please hold my mail, please forward my mail, etc., and they will do all of that. Again, viewed increasingly as the preferred housing choice, and I would suggest to all of you that this whole section of Westchester has nothing like what we're talking about. There is no new, highly amenitized rental community that has this level of service and amenity anywhere, midsection, that you can point to. And I would say that it's an entirely new housing offering that, for empty nesters in particular, will be very popular, and it's also a way for people to stay within the community. If they want to get rid of their homes but they still want a presence, may take the equity from their home, buy a house in Florida, but they still want a presence here, but want a really nice place to entertain and bring people to. This would be a perfect opportunity. No longer do we see these types of post-war apartments, relatively simple types of homes, simple kitchens, little closet space, typically surface parking. And so in our planning, we started thinking about what this should look like. We thought about Hudson Valley and Adirondack elements. Obviously not going to be exactly like any of this, but looking at timbers, large overhangs and eaves, stone, The coloration, the types of windows with divided lights, those were some of the things we began looking at. We're still looking at it. This is a more contemporary one, but, you know, with, again, timbers. This is in the Southwest, but types of use of materials, stone, brick, other projects we've looked at closely, and ending up with our early images of what we think are appropriate here. And so, again, in terms of management, we have management people for the maintenance of all the buildings and garages, dedicated staff. We have people that focus solely on the landscaping and snow removal. Concierge service, as I mentioned to you, security and pet services. So this project, we believe, will be highly tax positive to the school and to the town. The revenues generated far offset the school children generation rates. We've had extensive conversations with the school district as to what would be expected for school children generation. Those discussions began more than a year ago, and we looked at other similar rental communities, most particularly the Avalon communities throughout the county. There are about 7 of them, one here as well. We looked at, there are certain metrics that were used, and we came up with what we thought was to be expected in terms of school children generation, and entered into an understanding relative to those potential impacts, and offered up mitigating payments to them. What else can I suggest to you? And then an alternative use might be the single family. And the single family, the site would probably yield somewhere around 45 to 50 single family homes if it were to be subdivided that way. And such homes with 3 or 4 bedrooms would yield easily somewhere in triple the number that might be generated by this project. So again, looking at this being a new format that's not here, there is a void in this central Westchester area with amenitized rental communities in a green setting. The Avalon is a contrasting project, has no elevators. It only has stair access. You either enter at grade, you walk down, or you walk up 1 or 2 levels. And that does not appeal to a senior or an empty nester, someone older. It has no garages. In inclement weather, it's a real problem, particularly for older people at night with packages in their hand, and it has much fewer amenities. So it appeals to typically a much younger renter. The Harbor Square project that's finishing construction on the waterfront, very different. It's vertical, it's very modern. It will appeal to a much younger renter, in my opinion, but just not a very different setting. And then the only other projects that are of similar size, there's a couple in Elmsford, and then one in White Plains, both by Avalon. That's it. Should I stand here and field some questions?
Thank you for that presentation. Just one comment that you may not want to necessarily call out other developers. Not sure that that's,
Pardon?
playing nice in the sandbox.
Oh, I didn't mean
guess.
it that way, I'm sorry.
So I'm just saying, just because, again, I think the reason that you were doing it was trying to make, to differentiate yourself a little bit as to why you might be different or have a different appeal to a different demographic.
Yes.
So just maybe.
Oh, I didn't mean it that way, no,
was
just
in
a
that
different.
light. Just so that we, like I said, all play nice in the sandbox with, what we have currently here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that's all.
I didn't,
That's okay.
think of it
In any
that way.
case, just sort of get a little feedback from
Okay.
some of the board members. And I think, it's a really interesting project. We, at the town board, we already, even though, again, you really haven't been before us to present, we definitely get questions that come in by email or phone or whatever about, what's going on with this project. And one of the things that you talked a lot about was that, some of the advantages you saw. I was curious about the numbers that you talked about and the grid. I mean, maybe you could even back
Put it
up,
back
to,
up?
to that one grid where you had the overlay
Is
of
it
what you would
still
say single-family homes would be. That is within the current zoning. That's within the current zoning, correct? Like, in other words, you
Well,
had
we
it
looked at
subdivided into.
the lots surrounding it and just said if that was continued, what it might look like.
Well, actually, you'd have to use the R15 zoning that exists in the town. And I was going to make the point that the planning board has the authority to mandate clustering. So it could tell you can't do that. It could tell you've got to take those 40 homes or whatever the number is and cluster them at the top of the knoll where you intend to build anyway.
Be a very different product. I mean, it's not single family anymore, really.
I'm not
Advocating one way or another.
yes, I'm
saying
just
that-
making the
Alternative.
point that the alternative that you're showing
Mm-hmm.
would probably never happen under any circumstances.
And by the way, it could be single family, they would just be a lot closer together and if they required clustering.
Yes, we could do clustering, for sure. This was relatively simple. We just laid a grid over it and thought they would be quarter or third acre, not giving a lot of design thought to steep slopes or that might require. But for sure, if you did that, I would imagine you'd want to use some of the meadows that would be used. I suppose you could cluster up on top. The density would be very, very low.
Yeah, I think
Do you want
town
me to
board,
back
town board
up?
should
How do I
really
get into it?
discount that image.
Okay. Okay, so let's not go back then. We're just talking about it. It's okay. The other questions, that again have just come through sort of the general public have been about concerns about traffic and I kind of alluded to them a little bit before in the comprehensive plan discussion about and maybe even back in the infrastructure conversation about how sort of multiple developments that are all sort of slated for sort of in that area might adversely impact traffic, add to congestion. You alluded to the Jitney. I don't know if you have also, I think you maybe have done your own traffic study. I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, as well as, I'm starting to get tired, so. It was a long day. There was traffic and, thank you, the school impact. You mentioned some numbers, this versus that, but I was just wondering if you actually had real numbers that you would come up with for.
We submitted
students.
this EAF back in November, so it has everything in it. The table of contents, explains, but has all of the impacts analyzed. We have land use, cultural resources. We did a survey of the building, sent that up to the State Historic Preservation Office. That's been filed. We did a traffic analysis. We took back in September after the school got back in session. We did our traffic counts. The counts are here. Did the traffic analysis. We
Did you just kind of top line a couple of the
Sure.
conclusions?
The only intersection that needed adjustment was the intersection with 9A and Croton Dam Road, and it was a timing adjustment to the light of 4 or 5 seconds in terms of intervals that was needed in order to get the level of service to where it exists today. That was the only change. That was the only area of mitigation that.
And do you also remember what the impact was on the schools, just what the number,
Yes.
the number was?
It was in the low 20s, and we looked at 4 things. We looked at all of the Avalon projects and similar projects throughout the county, and we got all of their school children generation rates. There's one in Bronxville, there's one in Elmsford, there's one in Mamaroneck, there's one down in New Rochelle, there's one in White Plains, and there's one here.
And those are comparable in terms of the price point that they're renting at?
Similar
the
rental
size
points.
of the units?
Yes, almost very similar.
So you're looking at not
Ours,
just
we
their
believe,
projections,
will have
but
a
their-
little bit higher amenity to it. We're going for just a bit
Right.
higher than Avalon, for sure.
Okay. But in terms of the, you know, how you extrapolated the numbers based on their numbers, that was based on
Well, there's two
their
other,
actuals or their projections?
no, they're actual numbers. We got
Okay.
their actual school children, as did we get the actual school children for the Avalon here. And so we got those, and we came up with a grid. We came up with a grid of school children generation based on Avalon products and other similar products. We came up with school children generation rates using 2 consultants from Rutgers, Burchell and Listigan. David knows them quite well, and they're one of the go-to consultants that we use in this industry to determine impacts, and that information is all in here. And then thirdly, we use Bay Area Economics, who also do similar analyses. And then lastly, we looked very carefully at what was happening here at the Avalon in Ossining. So those 4 methods were then tabulated in the grid, and there's a range, and it's in the 20 kids entirely over the, from K through 12. And so we figured it was 1 to 1.5 kids per grade that would be added.
Okay. Did you want to add something to traffic?
I'm sorry. I know we both have questions. Anyway, have you come up with any traffic solutions for the 134-9A intersection? I know there's a lot of public utilities and there's a stream that goes through there. I know you said something about that, but you did a traffic study and there's another project or 2 also going into that area. That bottles up as it is, both from coming down toward the city and coming into that area. I was wondering if you had any thoughts or solutions for that.
134 being Croton Dam Road is,
Yes.
yeah. Again, it's in here.
Okay.
It came down to a timing difference for the lights. That the stacking, whether you're on Croton Dam or whether you are northbound on 9A, there's certain standards that New York State DOT allows for, and the adjustment of timing, and I don't know which segment it is, but there was a 3 or 4 or 5 second adjustment in the interval of timing that got you back to the exact same level of service.
Can I just jump in here for a second? I obviously have questions and you should ask them, but we shouldn't get too deeply into the weeds on environmental issues, because that's something that should be determined by whoever is going to be the lead agency. Is one of the things that you should talk about this evening after you hear the presentation, is whether or not you as an involved agency, because you have to ultimately approve any zone change, should be the lead agency, or you're going to let the planning board do that, who will ultimately have to review a site plan on this. So again, ask questions, but just keep in mind, we shouldn't get too deeply into environmental issues. That's for another day.
Okay.
Well then, I want to first say that I actually think that your presentation was very nice.
Thank
and
you.
I can see the vision. I think there's some real questions and issues about lasting impacts of various types of projects in that area. So without getting into weeds, I would say I would be happy to look at that document. I've never seen it. I do know that the DOT and the town of Austining, through the previous boards and the previous town supervisor, worked very hard on the 134-9A intersection. It is a difficult intersection for us. It is a dangerous intersection for us, and we've done many, 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 many things to try to mitigate it, and are still working on that. And further, in terms of timing with respect to those intersections, you then have to time further lights, because or else that corridor 9A was never meant for the amount of vehicular traffic that we have at this time. So it's a huge consideration with respect to traffic patterns. And with respect to other things, I think it's just a conversation about, you know, what the zoning is versus what it could be versus, you know, what we think, and I think that's just an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, the traffic, we did do the counts, and David knows the traffic consultants, John Meyer Consulting, who have done this work for many, many years. So their analysis is comprehensive to include all the intersections. Anytime you make an adjustment, there's, you know, a residual effect on other interchanges.
Affordability has come up as an issue too. So there's a lack of affordable rental housing in the country and in Austining. I just want to clarify for everybody here and everybody who's watching at home that this would be, you're allocating 10% of the units as affordable, and that would be for people with incomes up to 80% area median income?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There are several programs. It can be graduated, can be 40, 60, 80. We've not finished that discussion.
Okay, great.
But in terms of the impact, the affordable units, I think it's an interesting point. The affordable units, the cost to build them greatly exceeds the revenues that come in. And so, in essence, the non-affordable units, the market rate units, it takes about 2.5 market rate units to support an affordable unit. So of the total number that we have 19 affordables, it takes about 50 market rate units to subsidize those 19.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had a question when you mentioned, ooh, that was super loud. When you mentioned the sledding hill, and I know that the close proximity to Vets Park, did you have any ideas of maybe granting an easement to the town or village for those recreational spaces? Had that come up at all in the conversation?
It has not. We do plan to have an access way down to the park that will be lit, but no, we have no. I'm not sure what that would look like. A specific easement for sledding?
Yeah, when you said the sledding hill, so would that be, you know, for the exclusive enjoyment of people who are living at the River Knoll project, or would that be something that, I'm not sure what it would look like either. I was
I'm not
just
sure what
wondering
the
you meant by
insurance looks
that.
like for
Right.
something like that. I don't know.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
I don't.
I did have a question from someone. They were asking about, could it be a senior 55 and over so that to limit the amount of kids in the school? Is there any thought to that? Since it looks like that's one of the markets you're looking for?
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
It was super loud before.
It's off now.
Just talk louder.
Yeah.
I can pick you up.
You know, it's a completely different. Sure. It's a completely different set of circumstances. Seniors are much more complicated when you start limiting the numbers of people. So it's not something I've ever done. I've never done a seniors community. There are people that specialize in it, but it has a fairly narrow appeal. And I don't know, is that something you really want? Is that something where you don't want young couples, young
No,
families?
that was a question that person had asked me.
Oh.
I'm just wondering.
Not something I have never done one, so.
So, thank you very much.
Okay.
And I just wanted to follow up with a conversation about where we would like to go next with this, since right now it's before the planning board, but there is a request for a zoning change, and that is something that would be determined by us. So one of the things to basically keep Glenn from spinning his wheels, if we feel like that's something that we're never going to consider, and spending a lot of money moving forward on this project versus deciding either that we're not, no, this is absolutely not something we want to do, we're not going to ever consider a zoning change, or if it is something that we want to consider, it may not be this exact project, it may be some size, some different, changes that we would want, to see in the project. If we became lead agency, he would then be presenting to us, the town board, instead of the planning board. We would be the lead agency, and then we would have the option to, basically get all of the documents and all of the kinds of things that we've been asking a few questions on to be presented to us. We'd see engineering reports, we'd hear, I guess, from the village weigh in, and I don't know if anybody, either one of you, would want to elaborate a little bit on what that would mean, since I haven't taken this up before. Either one of you.
Well, again, either the town board or the planning board could be lead agency in this instance. And it is on the planning board agenda for tomorrow evening. The planning board was hoping that your board would give an indication of what your intent was on lead agency this evening, so that they could either move forward or back off and let the town board take the lead agency on this thing. The process would be, you would have to look at what the initial submission and analyze it, determine whether or not it addresses all of the potential significant environmental impacts. If you felt that you needed other people like David or whoever to review it, you would need to have them do that, and I would expect that you would, because I would imagine that, well, it's written in English, some of it may not be that understandable as far as what it really means. And then you would make a decision as to whether or not the information you have is sufficient in and of itself to issue what's called a negative declaration, which means that they don't have to do a full environmental review. Or if you think there are potential significant environmental impacts that haven't been adequately addressed in what's been submitted to you and any other supplemental information you've asked for, which you can certainly do, then you could require an environmental impact statement and go through that process, which has public hearings and so forth. And this is my own prejudice on this, because this board doesn't do this very often, or I don't know how often it's been done at all by the town board. I always recommend that you allow the planning board to do it, because the planning board has experience with seeker and has a different perspective on it. But obviously, you're the ones who are going to ultimately have to make the decision on the zoning, and if you feel it's important for you to do that process, then you should do it.
Just one caveat, and not advocating this, thank you, not advocating any position, but Danny, you mentioned that the town board may not be interested. In that instance, you don't have to go through the secret process. So Steve was talking about negative declaration, positive declaration. There's also another avenue, which again, I'm not advocating, but just to let you know.
Yeah, absolutely correct, and you should determine at the outset, and you said something about spending a lot of money and everything else. I mean, if this is something that the board, and as David is, I'm not suggesting that you do this, but if this is something that the board just thinks they wouldn't be interested in at all, you should tell this gentleman right now so he doesn't spend a whole lot of money going through a process to find out that you don't like it. I mean, you could ultimately decide that anyway after you see all of the information. But if your gut feeling is that you don't like this project, or you think it's 3 times the size of what it should be or whatever, and again, I'm not suggesting any of that to you, you ought to tell him now. If you don't have that gut reaction to it, then you should either take lead agency or allow the planning board to take over lead agency and begin going through the process. At the end of the day, you could still decide that you don't want to make the zone change. This doesn't bind you to do it. But you should just understand that as an option.
And you don't necessarily mean tonight. You could wait till Monday.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, because this is, because, I don't exactly know what other venue there would be to make that determination. It seems to me like that would be a process that we would wanna, deliberate tiny bit about, at least in public. I would like to ask to poll the board, and you can ask your question before we do that. We are missing one of our board members, she's out sick tonight, but I would like to sort of get a sense from the 4 of us, if you think this is not worth even considering, or if you think it is worth considering, and then if you do think it's worth considering, this proposal, then do we then send it back to the planning board and let them do the heavy lifting of kind of going through it, or do we want it to come before us?
And may I add some things too? We began discussions with the town in October of 2014. Informal discussions which became, whether they're formal or informal, I'm not really sure, on this project. We submitted designs back, so a year and a half ago. We got into discussions on whether we should do a long form EAF or we should do an EIS. And we felt we had concurrence, and we went to several months and months of using consultants to do the traffic analysis, all of the analyses, the submissions to the state, and then this very substantial document which was submitted last fall, albeit to a different board. And we got into lengthy conversations on how Stony Lodge Hospital would be viewed in terms of the redo of the comprehensive plan. It was substantial dialogue between my council, Bill Null, and the town. And the language was specifically written for this project with a plan being known. And having been vetted, we met with the Department of Public Works, talked to them about the impacts last spring. We, as you know, have had extensive conversations with the school board and have come to agreement, a letter, a document signed by both sides. So this has had a lot of work, and from our standpoint, a lot of concurrence and agreement and people participating in where this document is today. And to sort of hear rethinking this when we've been at this a year and a half is upsetting to hear, quite frankly.
I would like to say I have a really open mind about this, but to your statement, while I did hear about this and even had a conversation, I've never seen that booklet, nor did I ever know that there was, and I was on the previous board, so nor did I know that long process was happening. So you know, when there's statements about extensive conversations with the town, I'm not always sure who we're talking about. I can't sit here and say right this second that I absolutely out of hand would not look at this. For me, what comes up is that this is in connection with this. And so my feeling is that it is not, that it's part of a bigger thing. I cannot sit here right now and say, I think it looks great. The amenities sound great. But I think devils are in details, and that there's a lot more to look at. What does R15 look like? It is zoned for R15. What does cluster kind of look like? What should we be doing? Should we be keeping it in character with the rest of the neighborhood? Is this not a major change because the sight lines will be low and it looks nice? And I mean, those are all things I can't sit here right this very second. Traffic is an issue. Children are issues in terms of we love them, but we have a school that's very, 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 very full. And so I you know, I don't know about this being lead agency or sending it back to the planning board versus this whole conversation about what we're going to do with the comprehensive plan and the vision.
Well, ultimately, you have an application before you. Oh,
You're good.
am I?
You're good.
Okay, good. I always get confused because I think I should push it down, you know. But anyway, this is something that needs to go through, you know, a full process. You have an application before you. They're asking you for a change in the zoning, and if it's not something that you would reject out of hand, and then you should consider it and go through the process. And the question becomes, are you comfortable being the lead agency going through it? You would still be an involved agency. You would still be entitled to see all of the material that's submitted. You would still be in a position to comment on it to the planning board with respect to any concerns that you have and ask the planning board to address it. The question is whether or not you want to do the whole process and take it over, and that's certainly within your authority to do. I'm not discouraging, I'm just pointing out that it's a lot of work and usually planning boards do it.
You would have more control if you were the lead agency, but
Yes.
it is more work. And I just wanted to take issue with one thing that you said, Glenn. When we crafted the language that is in the comprehensive plan update, we certainly were aware of the plan that you were proposing, but those words were crafted very carefully not to endorse the specific plan that you're proposing.
Agreed.
And I think it's important for the town board for you to learn more about this project. The multifamily zone is the zone which permits about the highest density in the town right now. That permits about 6 units per acre. Glenn is asking you to create a new zone, which is roughly about 10 units per acre. So it's denser than the most dense zone in the town. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a lot to learn about this project.
And I have to speak to that point. And I was talking about the affordable. The affordable requirement is a very, it has a massive impact. And as I explained, the cost to build a unit of that quality and get essentially half market rents leaves a huge deficit, and that deficit has to be amortized. Without the affordable requirement, this could be a smaller project and come out economically almost the same point. The other thing too that feeds into the number of units we're talking about, again, I contrast it to the Avalon project, and I'm not trying to diminish the Avalon project, and I apologize if I sounded like that. The amenities such as the garages And the elevators, not in that project, have to be amortized over a certain number of people. It just doesn't work. And if you're trying to create a project that is very appealing to someone that wants a high-quality rental building, a certain number of density units has to be there. And these are 1 or 2 bedroom units. These are not large units. And then adding on top of it the affordable requirement. You just have to get to a certain size for it to all work.
You know, you talk about Avalon, that's okay, I understand what you're doing with that. I just do want to say also, you mentioned the other places where they are, New Rochelle,
Yes.
White Plains, Bronxville,
Yes.
and the Village of Austin. Those specific areas tend to be higher density locations by nature. And so just by that alone, there is a difference in terms of that density. This conversation about us being lead agency, I normally would not want to be lead agency. I agree. Planning board does it all the time. They understand it. They know it. But we're the ones who are going to have to make a decision with respect to this zoning. And so because of that, and hopefully with the assistance of our consultants and our lawyers, I would vote for us having lead agency. Do you have an opinion here?
I do have a concern about, I'm a firm believer is that you give jobs to people with expertise. So since this board does not have any expertise that I'm aware of in being lead agency on a project like this, I do worry about, and perhaps Steve or Dave, you can help clarify, when you talk about having more control versus more work, and more work versus less control and less work, what are we really talking here? Because if it's so much work on the board that we have a lot of responsibilities here and a much bigger picture to look at. So I do worry about being so focused on one project that other things suffer in the meantime. And I am concerned about a board that does not have experience doing this becoming lead agency.
Mhm.
So
Well, the first review that's usually done of a proposed, well,
You want me to jump in?
yeah, why don't you, and then
Okay.
I'll
All right.
supplement it.
Yeah, the point is, there are municipal boards that do undertake review of projects when there is zone change. I work with a couple that have done that. And obviously you're gonna rely upon your consultants for review and analysis of what's submitted to give you recommendations. So it's not like you're gonna be spending days and days and days and days reviewing stuff, although certainly you're gonna be getting a lot of material and you probably should look at it and not just rely upon what we're telling you. But it's certainly something that you can do. And again, the concern that I expressed before was just that it's not something that you're used to. If you feel it's important to take it on in this instance, then you should do it. And I think what Dave meant about more control, and you can supplement that, is obviously the lead agency is the one that's gonna make the determination on whether or not to accept that document is sufficient, require an environmental impact statement, make findings and determinations as to what the environmental effects are gonna be. You, not being lead agency, as an involved agency, would have input on that, and certainly could raise issues, but you're not gonna be the final determiner, is that a word? Of the, it is getting,
Decider?
it is decider. Yes, decider. You're gonna be the decider. It is really getting late, but the point is that you'll make the final determination on it if you're the lead agency, whereas the planning board will make the final determination on the environmental issues. Ultimately, you can approve or not approve in your legislative capacity of the zone change. But
I just wanted to maybe make a recommendation or suggestion to the board, which is in lieu of being lead agency, is there a sort of a middle ground, kind of to Steve's point, which would be that we would recommend the planning board be the lead agency, but we would make sure that every document that we receive along the way is distributed to the board. We are allowed and permitted to attend planning board meetings, but without giving any input. But if we are permitted to give feedback as a board, we then have an opportunity to say, okay, we want this to be on our agenda to discuss any information that we've received from the planning board, and then review it, and then have an opportunity to kind of, collectively go back and say, what, we really think that you need to look harder at this, that, or the other. But you just said that we could make recommendations
Well,
if there are things that we wanted them to look
in this
into.
case, because you're an involved agency, you can submit comments to the lead agency regarding the environmental review.
But they don't have,
But they don't have to
but they
listen.
don't have to listen. You've given up your control.
Okay.
And the way you described it, Dana, it sounded like you're doing all the work anyway.
Mhm. Okay.
Can I-
So in that case,
Dana,
let's go
can I
back to that.
just add? We expect you and the planning board and your consultants, David is known for getting down into the details purposely, and we expect that there'll be tremendous drilling down on all aspects. And that's a very time-consuming process with lots of consultants, with JMC, with my architects, with Alley King, Rosen, and Fleming. So it's time-consuming. I'm concerned about your time and your ability to do all of that. I don't personally see any way you are not going to be the beneficiary of that drilling down. You will. Disagree?
No,
No.
to
I
David's
don't
point,
disagree.
no, but to David's point, if you are gonna review all of those things and get into the details and so forth, you might as well be lead agency.
I have a question on the zoning decision. We still have to make the zoning decision.
At the end of the day, you are the only ones who can decide to amend the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Is our only option what it is, or multifamily? Is there any level of multifamily, or we just say multifamily and
Well,
they do whatever they
as-
feel?
As part of your review, you would determine whether or not the extent of the proposed development is appropriate. And you could certainly turn around at some point, based upon your review, and determine that, the density is too great, if you make that determination. Again, I'm not suggesting that.
So there are different levels of multifamily to zone it to.
Not-
There's not just multifamily or not
You're gonna-
multifamily.
Not currently.
There are not currently different zones, so it's not like the different residential ones where it's R40 and R15.
But they're proposing a new zone, correct?
Right, but I think what's being asked is there are different gradations of single family.
Right.
But in the town, there's only one multifamily
Right,
district.
but you have a proposal to do a density of 10 units to the acre.
Mhm.
After you review it, you could decide that 8 units per acre is appropriate, or whatever. I'm just giving that as an example.
Does that go with the zoning change, or do we have to be lead agency to do that?
Well, you ultimately use it as a zoning change, but when you go through the environmental review of the project, the things you're gonna look at are what is appropriate here based upon the traffic impacts, drainage on the site, visual impacts, and things like that, which are all part of the environmental review.
I understand that, but if we're not the lead agency, then I'm not doing the environmental review.
Correct.
So,
And
that's my question.
Yeah, no, so,
It's-
well, no,
It's a little bit too early
Yeah.
to know whether ultimately either you or the planning board is going to issue a negative declaration or a positive declaration. And I'm not advocating a positive declaration because it's kind of premature to reach that conclusion. But very specifically, if a draft environmental impact statement is written, there's got to be a chapter on alternatives. And we can even incorporate something like that anyway. But the chapter on alternatives can say, all right, you're analyzing the 10 units per acre because that's your proposal. We'd also like you to analyze 8 units per acre, and we'd like you to analyze 6 units per acre, to see what the conclusions are at those densities.
I think the other thing is, to me, that's in, it is getting late. And it is a whole as to, I mean, maybe it's great at 188, maybe it's less, maybe it's more, maybe it's not R15, maybe it is R15, maybe it's R40. Like, I just don't know where I am about this because I don't know where the need is and what the impacts are. And so I see this as part of the bigger picture of what is at need in turn, you know, so I see this as part of it, not just alone of it.
If you intend to read all the documents, including the document that Glenn has there, plus all the, my report, anything Steve writes, anything that other consultants write, if you're going to read all of that, I think as Steve said before, you may as well be a lead agency.
I think to Karen's point is we may not want to read all of that, right? Like, and not have the expertise behind it, right?
That's honestly how I feel.
Right, like that's a whole lot of your consultant.
I want to be
your consultant.
responsible about making a decision, so we're gonna be making a decision on the zoning. I think that we have a planning. I just worry that, given the amount of work that's been done so far, given the amount of work that's required to see this through, that we'll be putting ourselves in a position where it's maybe not the most efficient and effective way to get to the best decision for the town of Ossining. And that's really my objective, to be as efficient as possible, but to also make sure we come to the right conclusion. I'm not sure that us taking on lead agency gets us to that point.
I agree, I want the best thing for the community and the residents and the town of Ossining as well. And I also don't want to not be efficient or have the information. My concern, as well, as great as they are, is that when we do see certain things or pay attention to a certain thing, if we're not looking at all of it, that things might pass us by that we don't necessarily know about. And also that if we do see things and we would like to write to the planning board, while they may think that that's very nice that we wrote that and they take that under advisement, we have no control.
That's true, but we still ultimately have control over the zoning. So, and they know that. The planning board knows that. So the only thing that I would say about that is that, you know, we appoint the planning board, we know that there are people on the planning board who are architects, who are engineers, who live in the unincorporated part of the town, where this impacts, who have a vested interest also in the town, which is why they're volunteers on the planning board, and, you know, want, sort of have the same goals as we do. Ultimately, we do get to vote on the zoning change, and again, I would hope and believe that the planning board would realize that, and who's to say that they also don't have the exact same concerns as we do?
Well, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what their
Right.
concerns are because I'm not on the planning board.
Do we vote on the zoning change before or after it goes to the planning board?
Well, we could
After
never
they-
vote on the zoning change and not even consider it, as I
No.
understand. Or we would vote on it, I believe, well, let's ask, I don't want to comment on something legal.
Okay. You can, as I said at the start, you could just say, we don't want to consider this.
Right. Right now, we can say that if we wanted to.
Right.
Okay.
You can go through the environmental review
Mhm.
and decide at the end that you have no interest in adopting this particular change.
Even if the planning,
But,
even if the planning board as lead agency issues a clean bill of health environmentally, the town board can still say it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan and the scheme of zoning in the area.
Okay, so
Okay,
what's the
so that's
environment, so then can you give us some information about the timing and the process of the environmental review?
Well, we can certainly say that this item is on the planning board's agenda for tomorrow evening, and if you decide you'd rather have the planning board pick up that mantle, they will tomorrow night likely declare their intent to be a lead agency, and 30 days after that notice goes out to the other involved agencies, which would be like 30 days from Friday, let's say, they'll become the lead agency. And they'll be reviewing that document that Glenn has, and ultimately they're going to have to decide whether to issue a positive declaration or a negative declaration, ultimately.
The positive deck or the neg deck, because I can't say the words
Yeah.
clearly now. That once again has to do with either
A positive declaration is a finding, not
that
that,
there would be
not,
an environmental
not that there
impact.
will be significant
That there could
adverse
be.
environmental impact, but there may be
That there might.
significant. It's a very low threshold, actually.
But it's not done in conjunction with the comprehensive plan. It's done in conjunction with codes, correct?
It's in conjunction with the seeker regulations, the criteria for determining environmental significance under seeker.
Right, which is distinct from the issues of keeping in characters or goals or visions. It's just a distinct.
Yeah, the planning board would not be looking at the comprehensive plan per se. They would be looking at the criteria in Part 617, which are the seeker regulations for determining significance or determining whether to issue that pos deck or neg deck.
I will, again, I think at this point I'm gonna recommend that we let planning board be the lead agency and that we allow, ourselves then to the option of what we wanna do on the zoning. Again, I'm saying this based on our conversation tonight and what I understand is involved in the review. And, if I could get consensus.
I'm happy to give it to the planning board. I'm just gonna be really honest and say that I really wanna hold everything for a minute, because I feel like this is where, so we talked about this, and that's, I mean, I'm happy to give it to the planning board, and then in a week say we need to put a hold on everything, because we're looking to see what it is that we're trying to do with respect to implementation of goals that are in this comprehensive plan as ever. I mean,
Given the process at which this will move, and given the fact that we're going to give it to the planning board and you already have 30 days before the other agencies are informed, I actually think we have time because we have an existing master plan, comprehensive plan. I think we have time, and I think our time is better focused on looking at the comprehensive plan. I'm not sure in doing that, we may or may not decide that we need to put a hold on things, but my sense is that there's some things that we know now, there's some things that are fact, there's some things that are already incorporated into the comprehensive plan, and that would give us a better opportunity to really drill down on that and determine what the zoning requirements are, because that's really what this comes down to. So that, I concur with Dana, and I think that we should make the planning board lead agency, and I think we should focus on really unpacking the comprehensive plan and figuring out how this fits in. But I think that that actually might be a good way to do it in parallel.
I agree.
Are you good? Okay, that's great. Let's
So,
move.
so you're
Yeah.
gonna, let David indicate to the
Yes.
planning board that the town board is okay with the planning board acting as lead agency?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay?
I sure will.
David, do you want me to do this presentation tomorrow night to the planning board?
You gave it about
It was a
2 or 3 weeks ago.
different one. I think this is more helpful.
Wait, I'm gonna let you guys decide
I'm
this
sorry.
Yeah.
outside of this meeting, because it's been a very long meeting, and I just wanna see where we are on the agenda, which I've now lost. Okay, and I think what we're going to do now is take a motion to go into executive session if somebody would like to move,
So moved.
to discuss personnel matters.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay. And thank you all for your time, and have a great evening. And we'll see you, do I have anything else to say? We'll see you next Tuesday at our regular meeting. It will be at a regularly scheduled time,
Thank you.
7:30, and we'll be at the courthouse. Thanks and have a great night.